Enraged, she texted back, "If that's how it's going to be, I and my son are never going to return to that place." She typed, sent the message, and turned off her phone immediately. Gone are the days she would let them use her the way they want. Now, they want to do the same with her child? Over her dead body. She wasn't going to allow them harm her baby. After she was done, she heard her wolf's voice. "I'm sorry." Her wolf muttered apologetically. "Why would you be sorry? It isn't your fault." She answered her wolf softly. "It is. I made you go back on your words only to find out that he still hasn't changed from how he used to be 5 years ago." Her wolf answered, disappointment laced in her tone. "It's fine, though. You only did what you thought was right. We both made the decision for Aiden, but with the looks of it, Ezekiel only cared about his lover and himself." Alyssa answered as a sad smile curved on her face. "Are you okay?" Her wolf asked in concern. "I should be. I shouldn't be feeling like this." Alyssa muttered, her mood slowly changing. A large lump had found its way to her throat, causing her to heave really hard, like she couldn't breathe. "Alyssa, it's been 5 years already. I've moved on from the pain he inflicted on me daily. I've moved on from how he constantly embarrassed me in front of everyone, even though I was his fated mate. I've moved on from everything I passed through, but how come I still feel this hurt after seeing that text?" Alyssa asked as she held her hurting chest. "How come it hurts really hard after finding out he still loves Cindy, even after the stunt he pulled at the shop today, just to bring me back?" she asked again as the pain gnawing at her heart became unbearable. "It isn't just you that's feeling the pain. I am too. It's because of the mate bond, so you don't have to beat yourself too much." Her wolf answered as she tried so hard to hide her pain too. "I'm really filled with bad luck," Alyssa muttered with a soft and pained chuckle. "After everything I did to make myself forget, just a meeting with him was enough to crumble down the walls I've worked so hard to build, and it's all because of a damn mate bond," she muttered angrily. "Alyssa, I feel so stupid and useless. Why did I have to allow the mate bond make me so weak? Why couldn't I stand up for myself when he came here earlier? Why did I have to hide behind Lily like a weak puppy?" "But you at least tried to chase him away," her wolf muttered. "It wasn't enough." Alyssa yelled in her mind. "I should have stood my ground and never let him threaten me in the first place. Maybe then he wouldn't have ever thought of giving my baby to Cindy." Alyssa answered angrily. "What are you going to do if he comes back?" her wolf asked. "What else?" "Same thing that I texted him," Alyssa answered. "And if he gets aggressive?" her wolf asked again. "I'm not the same Alyssa he used to know. I'm not that weak and mute girl he enjoyed bullying years ago. This time, I'll stand my ground and let him know that I won't condone his attitude towards me. Also, I have you here to help me when things gets out of control." Alyssa muttered and her wolf nodded in understanding. The initial rage she had been feeling was enough to fill her with a newfound courage. With those thoughts in mind, she forced herself to forget about what had transpired earlier and retired to bed. She hadn't slept for long when her wolf woke her up. "What is it?" she asked as she scratched her eyes tiredly. "You have a guest," her wolf muttered. Just then, she heard pounding on the door, followed with Ezekiel's voice. She jolted from the bed in surprise. "What is he doing here?" she asked herself as she walked towards the entrance door in the living room. Upon sensing her behind the door, "Open this door, Alyssa!" Ezekiel ordered in on alpha tone, making Alyssa unable to resist his order, so she gave in to him. He pushed himself in immediately, ignoring the angry look in Alyssa's eyes. "Why did you switch off your phone?" Ezekiel questioned. "What are you doing here?" Alyssa asked back angrily. He had just appeared all of a sudden in the middle of the night, and that was the first question he could ask. "I wouldn't have to come down here if you had bothered to answer my calls," Ezekiel answered in anger. "And why would I do that?" Alyssa asked again. That only infuriated him. "What's with this attitude of yours?" "What attitude?" Seeing her feigning ignorance, that only increased his anger. "You now acting like this isn't going to benefit you," Ezekiel warned. "And who told you this was an act?" Alyssa asked again. She wanted to let him know that he couldn't control her anymore, especially now that she had a child for him. "So you've chosen the hard way. You want me to threaten you and use force on you to make you come back to where you belong?" Ezekiel asked, with a small scoff. As long as you are there, Moonstone Keeper's pack isn't a place for me or my son. Alyssa sneered. Our son! Aiden's my son too, Ezekiel argued. Really? Alyssa asked with a small laugh as she recalled the text he sent to her. You claim he's our son, but your action shows otherwise, she mocked. What are you talking about? Ezekiel asked in confusion. Wow, you even want to play dumb now? Alyssa asked in a mocking tone. Ezekiel stared at her in both anger and confusion. He wondered what had suddenly gotten into her for her to be acting this way. I don't even care anymore. I'm not in the mood to keep on arguing with you. Alyssa muttered with a small, tired yawn. Lock the door on your way out, she said, and was about to leave for her room when Ezekiel suddenly grabbed her wrist and pulled her towards him. Why would I leave when you're not coming with me? He asked as he tightened his hold on her hand. Being so close to him wasn't a good situation for Alyssa. She badly wanted to be far away from him, but one whiff of his manly scent was enough to leave her intoxicated. Her wolf wasn't left behind. Even though she had decided to support Alyssa's decision of letting go of Ezekiel and their mate bond, she couldn't control herself when she was being this close to her mate, so she urged Alyssa to stop resisting and give in to the attraction. It made Alyssa succumb to Ezekiel. Ezekiel, sensing her reaction, smirked and leaned closer to her. He needed to do something that would stop her from trying to escape from him, and there was only one thing he could think of at this point. He adjusted her long hair to her back, making her bare neck visible to him. As he stared at it, he felt some sort of excitement surge through him. He leaned in, breathed in her sweet scent, and let out a low growl. Hearing the dominant sound erupt from his chest, Alyssa was overwhelmed with pleasure, and she purred softly in his arms. He bared his pointed teeth and was about to dip his fangs into her flesh as a way to mark her when Alyssa came back to her senses. She sensed something was wrong, so she used all of her strength to push Ezekiel away. What are you trying to do? She asked. She held her bare neck in shock. That was a close call. If she had been marked by him, their mate bond would only get stronger, and that would only make it hard to get away from him. We are mates. Being marked by me isn't strange. Ezekiel muttered with a small smile as he moved closer to her, but she kept a distance between the two of them by moving 2 steps back. He had never bothered to mark her when they were still married because he thought she would never leave him no matter what happens. Now that she had decided never to be the same person she used to be, he wanted to hold her back. That thought infuriated Alyssa. You are disgusting, she muttered as she cleaned her neck thoroughly like his touch was a disease to her. Furious, Ezekiel grabbed her before she could think of escaping from him. Without waiting for her to fight back, he held her chin harshly and blocked her lips with his, engaging her in a deep kiss. The ride continued for a long time before the car came to a halt in front of a huge gate. Alyssa stared at the gate solemnly as memories flooded her head immediately. She never thought she would ever see it again. This used to be her home, but now it felt different. Ezekiel pressed on the car's horn, and the gates were opened for him immediately by the servants. He drove in and parked the car in front of the huge mansion. Alyssa got down from the car and stared at the building in front of her, a wave of déjà vu suddenly hitting her. It felt like the first time she came here with Ezekiel's father. The only difference is that she didn't come here alone and penniless. She came stronger than she used to be, her voice, her wolf, and her son all with her. She looked around and noticed eyes were all on her, mostly from all of the servants. She ignored them and walked towards the car's back seat. Before Ezekiel could, she carried Aiden and walked into the house, ignoring the surprised look from everyone around. She walked into her former room quickly. She didn't need anyone to direct her, as she had lived in the mansion for a long time. She placed Aiden softly on the bed since he was still sleeping, then proceeded to look around. While she was walking in, she noticed that nothing had changed in the mansion. Everything was still the same way she had left them, and her room wasn't any exception. She had thought that Ezekiel's lover, Cindy, would have taken her spot immediately, and definitely everything in the house would have changed. She walked towards a painting she used to cherish so much. Ezekiel had bought it for her before they found out they were mates. She stood in front of the painting and stared at it silently, her heart reminiscing on the old days and how she used to cry with the painting wrapped in her arms after Ezekiel's cold attitudes towards her. She always hoped and prayed for him to finally see her as his true mate and come to love her. Now, she could only shake her head and scoff at how stupid she was. She had already realized that there was only one woman in Ezekiel's heart. She was never going to waste any tears for him anymore. She wasn't going to care about what he decides to because now her only priority was her son and herself. She pulled the painting from the wall it was hung on and placed it at a corner. "Mommy." She heard all of a sudden and turned only to see Aiden awake. "Baby." She answered with a wide smile as she walked over to him. "Where are we?" His eyes wandered around the unfamiliar room curiously. "This," she waved around the large room, "is where I used to live." She answered. Aiden stared at her in confusion at first. Then his eye widened when he realized what she was talking about. "You went back to him?" Aiden asked, referring to Ezekiel, while Alyssa nodded with a small smile. "Why?" "Why not?" Ezekiel's voice was suddenly heard as he walked into the room. "This is I and your mother's home. You both had to come back sooner or later," Ezekiel added as he stood in front of Aiden. Aiden turned to stare at his mother, his eyes slowly getting teary. Alyssa saw the change in his mood and moved to comfort him, but it was already too late. The tears were already pouring like a huge waterfall. "Why? Why did we have to leave? We were fine in our home," he muttered as the tears kept pouring out. He couldn't imagine starting a new life somewhere else. "That isn't your home. This is where you and your mother belong, and I won't allow you both to leave anymore," Ezekiel muttered. Aiden came down from the bed and tugged at his mother's clothes with a pout on his face. "I don't like it here. I want to go back to Grim Hunter's pack. I miss Auntie Lily," he whined. Hearing Aiden's words, Ezekiel felt a sharp pang in his heart. He was his father, but he didn't acknowledge him as one. He doesn't even want to be in his rightful place, and it's all because of that wench called Lily. Why do they keep on uttering her name? His family had already been bewitched by her, and that only made him jealous. He pulled Aiden to face him and bent down to his level in a rather menacing manner. "This is your home now, whether you like it or not, and your Auntie Lily isn't going to ever be part of your life anymore." Hearing his harsh words, Aiden bursted out into more tears. "I don't want you. You are a bad daddy. I'm better off without a father," he screamed out angrily. Alyssa, who was heartbroken when she saw how hard her son was crying to go back home, became angry when she heard Ezekiel's words. She pushed him away from Aiden and landed a hot slap on his cheek. Ezekiel's face whipped to the side as the pain hit him. He held his face in shock as he turned to stare at Alyssa's angry face. This was the first time she was doing such a thing. Did he go that far? "You need to leave," she uttered as she angrily pointed at the door. Ezekiel turned to stare at Aiden. His heart broke when he saw his son hiding behind his mother. He knew he was wrong. He felt regret for what he had just said, but his pride wouldn't let him apologize. He turned on his heels silently and left, just like Alyssa had ordered. After Ezekiel had left, Alyssa tried to comfort Aiden by video calling Lily. She had been putting off calling Lily because she knew how she would react at her sudden disappearance. Now that Aiden was crying for her, she had no choice but to do it. When Lily answered the call, she was about to lash out at Alyssa when she saw Aiden's teary face. "What's wrong?" she asked in concern. Hearing Lily's voice, Aiden couldn't control his emotions. "Auntie," he cried out in his childish voice, "I miss you so much," he added with his eyes closed as the tears kept on pouring out. "I miss you too, baby," Lily answered, but he still didn't stop crying. She had to do all sort of things before she was able to cheer him up. When a smile finally appeared on his face, she smiled as a feeling of fulfillment washed over her. She engaged him in few talks before turning her attention to Alyssa. "I'm so sorry," Alyssa muttered before Lily could say anything. "Why did you go back? Have you suddenly forgotten about what he did to you? The pains he made you pass through?" Lily asked. "I did what I had to do to ensure mine and my son's safety," Alyssa answered. That was a lie. She didn't want to tell Lily about Ezekiel's threat on her, as that would only make her drive down here and it wouldn't be good for anybody. You should have at least discussed it with me before leaving. Do you have any idea about how scared I was when I couldn't find you both here? I'm so sorry. I really should have told you. Alyssa muttered in guilt. It's fine, though. It's not like you have much of a choice against that scum that calls himself your mate. I just hope you and Aiden are fine, Lily said. We will be. I hope, Alyssa answered. So what's your next plan in life? I hope you aren't thinking about living in your husband's shadow like before, Lily said with an eyebrow raised. Obviously not. I plan to continue what I've been doing back home, whether he likes it or not, Alyssa said, making a wide smile curve on Lily's lips. That's the spirit, girl, and if anyone tries to bully you or my nephew, let me know and I'll make sure that person would wish he or she had never crossed your path in the first place, Lily said, making Alyssa chuckle. She knew firsthand what Lily would do to people that crossed her. I will, she answered. They talked more and joked about unimportant things till Lily said she had to go open the shop, so they had to end the call. Seeing his mother was done talking, Aiden walked over to her and told her that Hugh was hungry, so Alyssa took him with her to the kitchen to make him breakfast. She placed him on a stool and got to work while ignoring the looks the servants around gave her. Soon after, she noticed the servants had left. She looked up only to see Sheila. Ezekiel's mother was also in the kitchen with them. Alyssa muttered a small greeting to her, not caring if she answered or not, before continuing what she was doing. You ran away immediately after you've gotten what you wanted from my son, Sheila muttered as she stared intensively at Aiden. I left because of the way your son treated me, Alyssa corrected. Really? Then why are you back? Sheikah asked with a scoff. I never wanted to. Your son forced me here, Alyssa answered back. You. Sheila was stunned as to how fearlessly Alyssa was talking to her. 5 years ago, she never had the guts to even reply her. It because she had finally gotten her voice back? I still don't think you're fit to be with my son, as you're too weak to be called his mate. I'll only try to overlook that because of the child you have for him, she said. Alyssa stared at her silently for a brief moment before turning away, not bothering to answer her. Also, now that you're back, I expect you to take up the position as Luna. That seat has been empty for too long, Sheila said, trying to hide how angry she was to Alyssa's behavior. You all never wanted me to take the post before, so why forcing it on me now? Alyssa asked with a small scoff. That's your rightful position as the Alpha's mate, so you... No, I'm not here to be the Luna, and I never will. I only came back because of my child, Alyssa stated firmly. Sheila stared at her silently. She didn't believe Alyssa's words, but chose not to argue further, so she left quietly. Alyssa made Aiden a simple sandwich, and they shared a warm moment together. Just as they are enjoying their time, Simon, Ezekiel's beta, interrupted them. He came to inform Alyssa that Aiden's transfer to a new school is complete, and that he needs to take him to school now. Hearing that, Aiden's mood turned sour immediately. He realized he was really going to stay in this place. The same place that scarred his mother. Hearing that, Aiden's mood turned sour immediately. He realized that he was really going to stay in this place, the same place that scarred his mother. Alyssa turned to Aiden with a smile, but he couldn't return it no matter how hard he tried. He was that upset. All right, let me help him get prepared, she said to Simon, and he nodded before leaving. Do we really have to live here? Aiden asked immediately after Simon had left. Alyssa sighed and crouched to his level. I'm afraid so, she answered as she gently combed through his jet-black hair with her fingers. What about our life at home? What about Auntie Lily? He asked again. This is our life now, our home. Alyssa mittered the last part heavily, like she was forced to. She never imagined she would term this place as her home again. Aiden stared at his mother sadly. His lips quivered, and he blinked his eyes severally. It seemed like he was about to burst into tears again. Even you don't like it here? Can you just bear it for now? With time, I'm sure you'll come to love this place. As long as I'm always with you, anywhere can be your home, you know? She muttered, and he nodded his head slowly. I know that. It's just that I miss Auntie Lily. Will I ever get to see her again? Aiden asked. From the day Ezekiel walked into their shop and had an argument with his mother and Lily, he could tell Ezekiel really hated his auntie. Now that he is here, there's no way Ezekiel would ever let him see his auntie. You know how much your auntie loves you. She'll always find a way to see you. Also, we can always talk to her on phone anytime you want. Alyssa told him. Really? She'll come see me? Aiden asked again as his sad eyes slowly brightened up. Yes, she will. Now stop crying. Your auntie wouldn't love to see you cry. Alyssa consoled, and he sniffed before drying his tears. Let's get you prepared for school, or you'll be late, Alyssa said and led him to the bathroom. She took off his clothes and brushed his teeth before helping him take his bath. After that, she dressed him up in a new set of cloth she had packed in her luggage. She styled his hair for him, and she gave him his backpack. She bid him goodbye and watched as he left with Simon. As Ezekiel drove to his office, he had an argument with his wolf once again. Why do you have to always spoil things with our mate just when we are getting good? His wolf asked. I'm not in the mood to argue with you, so just remain dormant like you've always been, Ezekiel answered tiredly. His mind still couldn't leave what had happened with Alyssa and his son. He remembered how they looked at him when Alyssa asked him to leave, and that made his heart ache. They hated him. His own family hated him. Do they have any idea what he went through to bring them back? Why couldn't they have a little bit of respect for him and recognize him as a vital part of the family? You want respect and recognition, but you can't give them the same thing. His wolf sneered at him. I couldn't control myself at that time. They just kept on mentioning that bitch's name right in front of me. It was really annoying. And then you had to treat them that way? Your divorce with Alyssa and her disappearance still haven't taught you anything? What if she decides to leave again? His wolf asked. Hearing that question, Ezekiel suddenly hit the brakes in the middle of the road. Thankfully, the road wasn't crowded, so there were no accidents. The cars around had to take another lane when they saw Ezekiel wasn't leaving soon, right after they rained curses on him. Ezekiel didn't care, as all that was on his mind was the question his wolf had asked. The question brought back memories of how he had suffered in her absence. The loneliness and longing he felt for 5 years. He couldn't go through that again, as he didn't know if he would be able to cope. No, she can't leave me. I'll make sure they never leave me again, he muttered to himself as he shook his head vehemently. You know you can't live without her, but you still don't want to treat her with the respect she deserves. You need to make amends with the both of them, especially Aiden. You're his father, and you need to act like it, his wolf advised. Ezekiel felt restless. He knew his wolf was right, and what he did was uncalled for, but he couldn't bring himself to admit that he was wrong. He ignored his wolf's words and started his car before driving to his office. At work, he couldn't concentrate. His mind was consumed with the memory of Alyssa's angry eyes, Aiden's words to him, and his tears. The guilt he felt was getting too much to handle, so he decided to try to at least put a smile on the little boy's face. He left work early and drove to a mall. He wanted to get Aiden some gifts, hoping to make up for his mistakes. At the mall, he walked down the aisle filled with toys with no idea of what to buy. He didn't know what his son liked. Why don't you take one of everything? His wolf suggested. Ezekiel agreed with the idea because Aiden was bound to like something. He bought everything he saw, and the mall workers helped him carry them outside. On his way out, he ran into Emma. Seeing her older brother, she didn't greet him like she used to. It seemed like she was in a bad mood. Why did you bring Alyssa back here? I get that she has a son for you, but bringing just Aiden would have even enough, she questioned. Ezekiel stared at her with a dark look clouding his face. I never knew what happens in my family concerns you too, he said in a cold tone. Why not? You're my brother, and I have a say in. Alyssa's my mate, my wife, and that child is mine, so wherever I am is also where they will be. I don't want to hear such words from you again, Ezekiel warned sternly. Emma wanted to reply when her phone suddenly started ringing. She pulled it out angrily and placed it on her ear. Her breath hitched when she heard the person from the other end of the call. It was the school calling, informing her that her son had been bullied. She dropped everything she was doing and drove like a crazed woman to the school. You're going to a new school. Hopefully, it will be different from the last. Try to get along with your classmates and also make friends with your mates," Alyssa advised as she brushed Aiden's short hair backwards. "Okay, Mommy," Aiden answered with a small nod. "Good boy, now let's go, or you'll be late on your first day," she muttered and handed over to him his school bag. They walked hand in hand towards the car Simon was waiting in. "Bye, baby," Alyssa muttered as she waved at him, and he waved back before entering the car. Alyssa watched silently as Ayman drove the car away. Even though she knew her son didn't want to stay here, she was glad that at least the bullying he received from his last school won't continue here. He was still a child, and she knew how much he suffered in his last school because of children that weren't trained well by their parents. When Aiden and Simon were out of sight, Alyssa walked back into the house. She went into her room and pulled out her laptop. Like she had told Lily, she didn't want to live under Ezekiel's shadow nor continuously rely on him financially. She had a good life in Grim Hunter's pack, and she intended to continue it here, even though the people here didn't like her. No matter what it takes, she was going to continue her career here. Through her computer, she browsed for properties online. As she scrolled through her computer's screen, she heard her phone vibrate, indicating that she had gotten a call. It was from Aiden's school. Simon had already registered her as Aiden's mother and also gave them her number so they were able to reach out to her. Alyssa picked up her phone in confusion, wondering why they would call her few hours after Aiden had left for school. She answered the call and waited for the caller to announce the reason for the phone call. Her heart thumped in her chest when she heard that Aiden had gotten into a fight. Aiden wasn't one to pick fights with others except. She ended the call swiftly, stood up, and rushed immediately to the school in a panicked state. At the school, she was directed to the principal's office. She saw Aiden sitting on a small chair in the principal's office, with his head bowed. When he noticed her presence, his eyes brightened up, and at the same time, it watered. She noticed a few scrapes on his face, and his clothes were slightly disheveled. She tried to steady her emotions as she walked over to him and hugged him tightly, like this was the first time she was seeing him in years. "What happened?" she asked in concern as she pulled away from the hug. Hearing her question and seeing her in such a state because of him, Aiden felt heartbroken and cried out. "He called you a mute," Aiden said as he pointed to a boy sitting a little bit far from him. Shock was an understatement for Alyssa. It's been years she was last seen in this pack, so how would a little child know she was once a mute? She turned to see who it was, and like she had expected, it was indeed a child. He seemed a bit older than Aiden, with about a year and a few months, so it still baffled her as to how such words would come out of an innocent-looking boy. "He claimed that you were once a mute and called me a little mute too, since I was your child," Aiden added as he cried out louder. Lyle, she had thought, Aiden only gets into fights if it involved her. She thought this place would be different. She was hoping bullying would end here, but she was wrong. This was only the first day, and Aiden had already gotten into a fight. What was the use of moving here then? "I didn't want to fight, but he kept on insulting you, so I had to make him stop." Aiden apologized sadly. "It's fine. You did the right thing. You can't always keep silent when others are picking on you. I loved that you stood your ground and fought back." Alyssa consoled as she patted his head lovingly. "You are supposed to reprimand him, not console him. As young as he is, he's already picking fights with others. What about when he grows older?" the principal asked, making Alyssa frown. "What do you expect him to do? Smile and wave while others pick on him?" Alyssa asked in anger as she turned to stare at the muddle-aged woman. "He should learn not to pick fights with others. If you had done your job well, this wouldn't have happened in the first place. He's just starting, and he was welcomed in by being bullied? How's that right?" Anger was an understatement of what Alyssa was feeling at that moment. She had forgotten so soon what this place was. How she suffered over the years in the pack. She thought that they would have changed already, but it seemed like their attitudes are being passed from generations to generations. Now, they want the same thing to happen to her son? No way. When she was being bullied, she had no one but herself to run to, but her son had her, and she was going to do whatever it takes to protect him. The principal opened her mouth to say something, but she ignored her and turned to the little boy. He looked so familiar to her, like she had seen him before, but she couldn't pinpoint where it was, so she ignored the feeling. "You did something really bad. Don't you think you have to apologize to him for what you said?" Alyssa asked in a stern manner. "Why would I apologize to him? Don't worry. When my mother gets here, she'll teach you and your son a big lesson," he said arrogantly as he eyed them both. Alyssa was stunned at the words that came out of such a little boy. She wanted to meet the said mother to see who would ever raise such a child. Normally and sensible parents these days were so hard to find. The child did a bad thing, didn't want to apologize, and was still sure his mother would support his act. Not everyone should be a parent. Raising a child this way would only haunt the parents in future. Just then, a familiar high-pitched voice rang in the room. "Who dares to hurt my son?" Alyssa recognized the voice as Emma's. Her shock immediately died down when she realized that Emma was the boy's mother. No wonder the boy looked familiar. That explained his arrogance. Emma was way worse than this when she was a child. Not like she stopped being obnoxious when she grew up. She could still remember when the boy whose name is Xavier celebrated his first year after birth. He was a really sweet child, and now he had grown to be such a spoilt brat with no sense of guilt when hurting others. Emma had really passed her arrogance down to her child. "What happened? How could my son get into a fight?" she asked as she picked up her son lovingly. Just then, the door to the principal's office was opened again, and Ezekiel walked in this time. Alyssa stared at him in surprise, wondering why he had come to the school. Emma stormed into the principal's office, rushed towards her son, and lovingly picked him up from where he sat. "What happened to you?" Emma asked in concern as she touched his red face and assessed his torn clothes. Seeing his mother, Xavier feigned pain, even though he was completely fine a few seconds ago, and that made Emma grow angrier than she already was. "What type of kindergarten is this? After all I've spent here, I still have to see my son in such a state. What do you guys even do here?" she asked angrily. The principal bowed her head in fear, not bothering to utter a word as that would only bring more issues for her. Emma is one of the biggest investors they have, coupled with the fact that she's the alpha sister. No one wanted to cross her as they were scared of being outed. The principal turned in fear, and when her eyes met with Aiden's, the fear quickly switched to anger. You caused this! Apologize right now!" the principal ordered. Aiden stood his ground and refused to apologize. "Why should I when he started it?" Aiden asked back. "Apologize right now or what?" Alyssa asked as she gave the principal a killer look, making her shift away in fear. "So it's your son that did this to my precious boy?" Emma asked as she eyed Alyssa and Aiden in disdain. "I should have known. Only one person could mother a gangster for a son," Emma added, unable to hide how disgusted she was to see the both of them despite Aiden being her brother's son. "You of all people shouldn't be saying that, you know. One look from your son and I could tell he's yours. He inherited everything from you, lying, bullying, assaulting others, and many more. Congrats, you've succeeded in giving birth to your carbon copy," Alyssa mocked. "What did you just say to me?" Emma asked as the disgust on her face switched to anger. "You heard me, or do I have to repeat it to you?" Alyssa asked back, not letting Emma's stance and words intimidate her like it used to. "Wow, you've managed to grow some balls over the years. Is it because you can talk now?" Emma taunted. "It's been 5 years already. You don't expect me to still be the same person I used to be. I wouldn't really blame you. Everyone grew up except you. You're still the same child, but in a grown woman's body." Alyssa shot back, making Emma's face turn crimson red in anger. The two had already ignored their children and were in a one-on-one battle against each other. A battle that had already been there since they were little children, except that the tables had turned now. The victim of before is more stronger than she used to be, and won't let anyone belittle her nor her child. "Just because my brother brought you back into the pack doesn't mean you're wanted here. Why don't you get the memo and leave with your... What is going on here?" Emma held back her remaining words when she heard his loud voice, which was filled with great authority, sending chills to her bones. That was the moment Alyssa realized that Ezekiel had been in the room with them. She was so engrossed in her fight with Emma that she didn't notice his presence. What was he doing here? To add to the issues at hand? She asked herself as she pulled Aiden behind her, shielding him with her body. Ezekiel, who noticed what she did, arched his brow in confusion. Why would she shield their son from him? Did she think he wanted to hurt them? That thought broke his heart. His own family feared him. He held back his emotions and made it seem like he didn't care, but his heart felt like it had been stabbed 1,000,000 times. He stared around the room, taking a short glance at each of their remorseless faces, and asked again, "What is going on here?" On his way to the principal's office, he overheard what had happened. Aiden attacked Xavier, but he found that hard to believe. Aiden didn't look like one to get into fights with others, and Xavier already had an history with bullying. "This little gangster attacked my son. See what he did to him," Emma complained as she showed Ezekiel Xavier's red face and his torn clothes. "Is that true?" Ezekiel asked Xavier, and he nodded his head frantically. "He came unto me all of a sudden and attacked me all over. I didn't do anything to him," he muttered, adding to his mother's claims. Alyssa scoffed angrily as she listened to mother and son lie so perfectly. "Aiden, did you attack him?" Ezekiel asked, but he didn't answer. He turned away from Ezekiel's gaze and hid behind his mother. "See, he can't even answer. He knows what he did," Emma mocked. "Keep quiet. Let me do the talking." Ezekiel muttered harshly, making Emma embarrassed before turning back to Aiden. "Come here," he muttered as he pulled Aiden away from his mother and turned him to face him. His eyes darkened when he saw the cuts on Aiden's face and his torn clothes. It was obvious what had happened, but he wanted to get to the bottom of the matter before judging. "Did you attack him?" he asked again slowly. Aiden turned to face his mother, and she signaled him to answer. She never taught her son to lie, but if they wanted to use it against him, she would be there to always protect him. "I did," Aiden answered with a small nod. "Why did you attack him?" he asked, making Alyssa stare at him in surprise. Normally, he never bothered himself to find out the truth before judging, because he always thinks things are the way he sees them as. Why bother asking? He already admitted he attacked my son for. One look from Ezekiel was enough to cut Emma off. She bowed down her head and moved back in fear when she noticed his hard gaze. "Why?" he asked again, and Aiden explained all that had happened without leaving any part out. "Thank you for being honest," Ezekiel muttered after hearing Aiden's side of the story and patted his head lovingly. Aiden turned and returned back to his earlier spot, behind his mother. And so what? Xavier was only speaking the truth. Alyssa was once a mute. Why would he attack him just because he spoke the truth? That boy had better apologize to my son, Emma ordered, making Xavier smirk arrogantly. Ezekiel ignored Emma's words and turned to Xavier. "Apologize for what you said to Aiden," he ordered, leaving everyone in the room stunned. "Apologize for what you said to Aiden," he ordered, leaving everyone in the room stunned. Alyssa wasn't left out. She never expected him to take Aiden's side because of how he used to treat her before. Anytime she was in an altercation with others, he always blamed her, even though he knew she wasn't at fault. It was much easier to blame her because he enjoyed seeing her suffer. She expected him to treat Aiden the same way, but no, he was defending him. Has he really changed? But why? Emma stuttered out in shock, but Ezekiel still stood firm in his defense of Alyssa and their son against his sister and her child. This would teach him never to mock others. "Apologize to Aiden," Ezekiel ordered in more authoritative tone. Seeing his mother couldn't be of help anymore, as she had already succumbed to Ezekiel's strong attitude, Xavier gave up. "I'm sorry, Aiden," he apologized reluctantly. "Next time, be mindful of the words you throw at others. It might not always end with a few exchange of words and punches." Ezekiel warned while Xavier nodded his head slowly, trying to hide his pain and anger. His uncle, who had always taken care of him like a fragile egg, was supporting a strange boy and his mute mother. It was enough to hurt his feelings, but he held his emotions in check. "Is that enough for you?" Ezekiel asked Aiden, and he nodded his head slowly. "Good. Now that everything has been settled, let's go home now." Ezekiel muttered with a wide smile and attempted to hold Aiden's hand, but he withdrew himself. He held his mother and she led his outside, totally ignoring Ezekiel. Ezekiel stared at their retreating figures and rubbed his temple as a frustrated sigh escaped his mouth. His son was still mad at him. He ignored Aiden's reaction to him and followed behind them. Emma watched in disappointment as her brother followed behind that wench and her bastard son like a loser. What's wrong with him? How come he's suddenly forgotten how he used to despise Alyssa and how he claimed he would never accept a child from her? Now, he's acting like the world had ended just because she didn't have eyes for him like she used to. Isn't that what he wanted initially? For her to get frustrated and leave so he could get married to his love, Cindy? Why is he letting go of his beliefs for someone that isn't worth it? Something was wrong somewhere. He even supported her child against his own nephew. It wasn't like him. At that moment, Emma was sure Alyssa had did something to her brother. She had casted a spell on him that made him act like an idiot and a loser around her. Now, it's affecting him seriously and making him lose contact with his own family. She had to do something to stop it. She couldn't let her brother keep acting like an idiot because of them. She turned to the still shaking principal. I hope what happened today won't ever repeat itself, or else I'll withdraw my child and all of the investments I've made in this useless school. She muttered as she eyed the principal in anger and left with her son before the principal could tender an apology. She managed to catch up with Ezekiel in the school's car park and was angry to see that Alyssa and her child were still with him. Don't tell me he wants to drive us together, she thought to herself as a deep frown found its way to her face. She had driven here earlier with Ezekiel when she got the call as she was so angry to drive her own car. She walked over to them and was about to question Ezekiel when she heard Xavier yell happily. Ezekiel had opened the back seat of the car, revealing different toys. Wow! A Mattel model! I love it so much! Xavier exclaimed as he picked the lost expensive brand. Because of the toys you bought for me, I forgive you for how you betrayed me earlier, he added as he eyed the toy happily. Aiden watched sadly as Xavier played with the toy. He loved Mattel toys too, but the man that claimed to be his father overlooked him and bought it for some other boy right in front of him. Alyssa didn't fail to catch the pain in his eyes, and it made her heart ache for him. The toys aren't for you. I bought them for Aiden, Ezekiel announced, which made Aiden's eyes to light up immediately. He really did buy the toys for him. That means he cared about him too. Ezekiel felt his heart soften as he watched Aiden being happy. He was finally able to put a smile on his son's face. Who knew toys were the way to a child's heart? It's not the toy, it's the effort. His wolf corrected him and he nodded frantically in agreement. Whatever was the reason, as long as his plan wasn't in vain, give the toys to Aiden, Ezekiel ordered Xavier. Xavier felt a strong sense of betrayal as he listened to his uncle's words. His dearest uncle didn't care about him anymore, and it's all because of this mute boy. As Aiden's smile increased, so did his anger. He threw the toy he was holding at Aiden. Out of reflex, Alyssa quickly shielded her son with her body, making the toy strike her instead at the corner of her eye. Ezekiel's anger returned when he saw the cut close to Alyssa's eye. What is wrong with you, Xavier? He asked Xavier in anger. Seeing his uncle's cold look, Xavier couldn't control his emotion anymore, so he bursted out in tears. Why would you yell at him that way? Emma asked back as she shielded Xavier away from Ezekiel's cold gaze. You need to control your child. Look at what he did to her. He yelled out as he checked on Alyssa's injury, but she pulled away from him. Ezekiel felt his heart break as she moved away from his hold. Does he have some kind of disease that makes her wary of him? You know what? Xavier said all of a sudden as he dried the tears in his eyes. I don't care anymore. My dad will get me toys too, the ones that are better than these nonsense. He yelled out stubbornly. I'm so disappointed in you, Ezekiel. Emma muttered as she left angrily with her child. Ezekiel could care less about Emma and her son's words to him. His heart was still with his one and only family, and they didn't seem to notice him in their little moment. Are you all right, Mommy? Aiden asked as he stared at the cut at the corner of his mother's eye. I'm fine. It's just a little cut. Alyssa answered as she wiped away the blood that was oozing out. It isn't just a little cut. You need to see a doctor. Ezekiel muttered as he held her face in his palm and assessed her injury. "I said I'm fine," Alyssa said and tried to pull away from his hold, but he held her in place. "Stop resisting and just listen to me for once." Ezekiel ordered and forced her into the car. He placed Aiden in the back seat and drove the both of them to the hospital. He made sure a doctor attended to Alyssa while he and Aiden waited for them in the waiting room. Being alone with his son, he figured it was a perfect moment to make amends. "I'm so sorry for everything I've done and said to you and your mother." He apologized in guilt. Aiden stared at him quietly, wondering why he's suddenly apologizing to him and not his mother, since she was the one he had wronged the most. After thinking for a while, "Thank you," Aiden muttered softly. He was thankful for the toys and the fact he was apologizing by himself, but he still couldn't forgive him as he hasn't apologized to his mother yet. That wasn't the answer Ezekiel was looking for, but he preferred it to nothing. This was a good start to make his son warm up to him. With a wide smile, "I'll try harder to be a better father and husband to you and your mother," he added, and Aiden replied him with a small nod. That was enough to reduce the heaviness in Ezekiel's heart. Silence resumed in their midst as both father and son waited for doctor to finish treating Alyssa. Even though Alyssa tried to struggle, Ezekiel forced her and made her go with him to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, she kept giving Ezekiel small glances. She noticed the small frown lines on his forehead and how he tapped his finger impatiently on the steering wheel. He was worried. But why? Why is he suddenly caring for me? Why is he suddenly acting like I matter to him? Why is he acting like things are better between us? Alyssa had many questions in her head, but no answer to them. She couldn't even ask Ezekiel because she knew he was going to lie or turn back to the scum he used to be. The only thing she could do was sit and watch till he couldn't continue with his act anymore. Knowing him, it won't take time for him to go back to who he once was. She moved her eyes to the mirror in the car and noticed how happy her son was in the back seat, being swamped by many toys. She doesn't care whether Ezekiel truly changes or pretends to change towards her. All that matters now is her son's happiness. If she noticed he starts treating her son the way he treated her, she wasn't going to spend one more day in that mansion he calls a home. A few minutes later, the car stopped. Alyssa looked out only to see that they were already at the hospital. One look at the hospital's building was enough to remind her of the time she spent here. This was the same hospital he made her lose her first child forcefully, and also the hospital she found out that he and Cindy were going to get married, thereby making her eyes open to where she stood in his life. As the memories flooded her brain, it hardened her heart the more. She was about to open the car and walked out of it when Ezekiel suddenly opened her side of the car for her. Why is he taking this act too seriously? She thought to herself inquisitively as Ezekiel kept staring at her the same way he used to stare at Cindy whenever she got hurt. 5 years ago, if Ezekiel had treated her this way, she would have easily fallen for it. She had no one and was in desperate need for someone to love her. Now she knew the truth. She knew how good Ezekiel can be when it comes to acting like this, and how fast he changes when he realizes he isn't going to gain anything from the act. She pushed away the hand he had stretched out for her to hold onto and climbed out of the car by herself. Ezekiel stared quietly at his outstretched hand that she refused and moved it back in embarrassment. He decided to act like he wasn't fazed by what she had just done and walked towards the back seat before opening the door. Aiden jumped out of the car and walked to meet his mother, totally ignoring Ezekiel. Mother and son walked hand in hand into the hospital's building, leaving Ezekiel behind like they didn't drive down to the hospital together. "Don't complain. This is your punishment," his wolf said to him, but Ezekiel quickly blocked him out. He still couldn't understand what he had done to Alyssa to warrant being an outcast to his own family. He could touch them and walk with them, but he didn't feel that warmth he had always dreamt of. They were close to him physically, but he still felt a great distance between them and him. There were a lot of things he could take, like Alyssa being cold to him, but now it had been extended to his son that hadn't even known him much yet. Did I leave such a bad first impression? he asked himself when he recalled how Aiden chased him out of their home back in Grim Hunter's pack. He let out a small sigh as he thought of how to make his son forgive him. "Why don't you apologize sincerely?" "He's Wolf," suddenly asked, making more emphasis on the sincerely. He thought about what his wolf had said quietly. It was a good idea, but he wasn't sure if he could do it. He had never apologized to someone before, as he never saw anything wrong with his actions, but now he had to swallow his pride and apologize to a kid. His kid. He walked into the hospital's building and caught up with Alyssa and Aiden. Alyssa knew her way around the hospital as she frequented it years ago, mostly after losing her first child. She got to the doctor's office and left Aiden with Ezekiel in the waiting room before walking in. When the doctor asked what was wrong, she showed him her eye. "But it's already healing. What do you want me to do now?" the doctor asked when he saw the cut was closing up little by little. Ezekiel had been too worried to notice that Alyssa now had her wolf. Little things like this didn't affect her anymore, and Alyssa wanted it to stay that way. Not everyone needed to know that she already found her wolf, especially Ezekiel. "Just put a bandage on it or anything you can to make it look like I was really injured," Alyssa told him. He stared at her in confusion for a while before giving in. He brought out a bandage and treatments for the healing wound. He applied the treatments on her wound before dressing it with the bandage. "Thank you so much, Doc, and please, don't tell anyone about this," she pleaded, and the doctor nodded in understanding. Shiz went back to the waiting room to get her son, only to him interacting with Ezekiel. The air felt different, better than it was when she left them earlier. Had Aiden finally warmed up to Ezekiel? "Mommy." Aiden, who was the first person to notice Alyssa's presence, called out and walked up to her. "How are you? How's your injury?" Aiden asked as he stared at her bandaged wound in concern. "As you can see, it's been treated already, so I'll be fine," she assured. "Since your wound has been treated, I want Aiden to get a full checkup, just in case," Ezekiel announced as he walked towards them. "Why?" "But he's fine," Alyssa argued. "We can't always tell," Ezekiel answered as he picked up Aiden and walked back into the doctor's office. Alyssa wanted to stop him, but she was helpless because she knew Ezekiel wasn't going to listen to her. Also, seeing Aiden interact happily with him, she held herself back as she didn't want to stop their closeness. Aiden was finally getting what he had always wished for, and just because she didn't like Ezekiel, she couldn't hinder her son from being happy. She's his mother, and should ensure he enjoys everything life had to offer, even though it would be the opposite for her. After they were done with the checkup, Alyssa left to go get the test results, so Ezekiel and Aiden would have more time to themselves. As she walked, she bumped into someone by mistake. She was about to apologize when she saw who it was. Their accidental bump made Cindy's handbag slip from her hand, and all of the contents in it poured out. Alyssa's eyes immediately caught sight of a sheet of paper and recognized it to be a pregnancy test. She ignored Cindy and the rest of the contents that had poured and picked up the sheet of paper. It showed that Cindy was a few weeks pregnant already. Seeing the result, Alyssa felt her heart break. Cindy was already pregnant for Ezekiel. Why did he still drag her son and her back to this hellhole? Isn't Cindy enough for him? Cindy snatched the test away from Alyssa and smirked when she saw the pain and hurt on her face. "I thought I couldn't give birth to children anymore, but the moon goddess has finally blessed I and Ezekiel with our own child," Cindy muttered, bringing Alyssa out of her reverie. Hearing her words, Alyssa immediately realized what she was trying to do. Cindy was cunning but not really smart enough to hide her emotions. "I don't care," she muttered and turned to leave, but Cindy stopped her. "Ezekiel really loves this child. It wouldn't take too long for Yor to be chased out of the family again, just like 5 years ago," Cindy added, trying to irk Alyssa, but Alyssa wasn't moved like she used to be. "I see," Alyssa muttered calmly and tried to leave again, but Cindy held her back. Seeing Alyssa not caring anymore like she used to years ago made Cindy anxious. If she isn't able to spite Alyssa, like she before, it would be harder to make her leave. "Let go of me," Alyssa muttered as she tried to pull out of Cindy's hold, but she wouldn't let her. Out of anger and impatience, she used all of her power and pulled herself out of Cindy's hand. She was so strong that Cindy couldn't hold on much longer. In a panicked state, Cindy decided to do something, so she pretended to trip. Out of protective instinct for the pregnant woman, Alyssa stretched out her hand to catch her, but from a third person's view, the scenario was much different. "What are you trying to do?" Alyssa suddenly heard a loud voice snap at her. She turned only to see Ezekiel staring at her in fury. She turned back to face Cindy, who then smirked at her. That was when she realized she had fallen for her trick once again. She turned back to face Cindy only to see a wide smirk appear on her face. That was when she realized she had fallen for her trick once again. She scoffed with a small head shake and moved away from Cher Cindy laid. Like she had expected, he had gone back to whom he uses to be. Just one small act from Cindy, and it was enough for him to drop all of the act he has been putting on since. They really do fit each other. 5 years had passed, and they still didn't change how they used to be. Cindy was always faking pain, and Ezekiel would keep running to her rescue, like someone whom a spell had been casted upon. He couldn't see the truth whenever Cindy faked being in pain, and she knew that, so she always made sure to always use it to her advantage. She had always been used to his indifference towards her whenever Cindy was involved, so this didn't hurt her, neither was it surprising to her. What made her annoyed was that he still had Cindy, and now she is even pregnant for him. Why did he still force her and her child back after everything he had done to her when they were still together? He loves Cindy and should be more than contented with being with her, fathering the child in her belly. At least, her and the baby would actually want him in their lives. Alyssa's thoughts and cold gaze on Ezekiel were interrupted when Cindy started groaning in pain. Cindy, whom had been laying on the floor, happy that her plan had worked, and Ezekiel would finally chase Alyssa away from the pack, panicked when she saw the look in his eyes. He had been mad at Alyssa at first, but when he saw the cold look in her eyes, his gaze softened. It seemed like he had an internal conflict with himself, but Alyssa didn't seem to notice that. Cindy had known him for many years and was sure what that look meant. She knew it wouldn't take long for him to start regretting yelling at her, so she had to do something to pull his attention back to her. As she yelled out in pain, she clutched her stomach tightly. Like she had expected, Ezekiel let go of his conflicted emotions and ran towards her, his face etched with worry. Due to how loud Cindy had screamed, a large crowd had already gathered around them, and they watched to see what was happening. They were even more interested when they saw their alpha in the midst of 2 females. The drama was bound to get hotter. "What did you do to her?" Ezekiel yelled at Alyssa, making the crowd gasp in surprise. "Did she attack the lady?" one asked. "I don't think so. She looks innocent to do something like that." Another replied, "You can't judge someone you don't know just by their looks. The most evil ones are the ones with the prettiest faces." Series of whispers rang through the large hall as everyone watched in anticipation, but no one dared pick up a phone to record the scene, as they were afraid of what would happen to them if they were caught doing so. Hearing the whispers, Cindy's insides bubbled happily. Things were going as planned, and she could also use the crowd that had gathered to her advantage. "I didn't do anything to her," Alyssa argued as she glared angrily at Ezekiel. She wondered how blind he was that he couldn't see through her acts. "Look at the way she's shooting daggers with her eyes at the alpha. This lady is bad news," someone from the crowd muttered, and the rest onlookers nodded in agreement. As seconds passed, the situation was becoming more unbearable to Alyssa, with Cindy was enjoying the turn of events. I have low blood sugar, and I lost my balance when Alyssa pushed me. Now I've twisted my ankle." Cindy muttered in pain as she tried so hard to look pitiful. See what she did to the lady. She hurt her and still doesn't want you admit it. That vixen deserves to be punished by the alpha. People like her shouldn't be allowed to roam freely. So who know what else she would do? Alyssa scoffed as she listened to their words and shook her head. Everyone in this pack are idiots. Well, I can't blame them when it's an even bigger idiot that's their alpha. She thought to herself as she eyed Ezekiel angrily. She knew nothing good would come out of staying there more, so she decided to leave with her son. If Cindy was really hurt, he should take her to see a doctor and get her treated. After all, they were still in an hospital. She was about to leave to find Aiden when Ezekiel suddenly pulled her back by grabbing her wrist. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked as he held her still from moving. "Away from you, and that lying wench!" Alyssa muttered as she tried to pull away from his hold. Ezekiel shut his eyes tightly like he was trying to suppress his emotions. He took in a deep breath and opened them back. "You have to apologize for what you did to her first," Ezekiel demanded as he pulled Alyssa to where Cindy laid on the floor. "Why do I have to apologize when I did nothing wrong?" she asked as she struggled with him. Aiden stood at his spot as he watched his father pull on his mother violently, totally ignoring him. His heart was heavy, and it felt like he would cry anytime soon. His father was treating his mother bad again, and it's all because of that lady. They were so engrossed with their drama that they didn't realize that he was watching them. "It's fine if she just says sorry to me," Cindy said as she struggled to sit up. She was definitely enjoying the show. Alyssa managed to pull away from Ezekiel's hold. She walked towards Cindy, who had a satisfied look on her face and crouched in front of her. She raised her hand and helped Cindy arrange her scattered hair while Cindy watched in confusion. "You want an apology, right?" she whispered in Cindy's ear. "Well, then get on with it," Cindy whispered back rudely. With a wide smirk, "Then, I'm sorry for this," Alyssa whispered to her. Cindy didn't know what that meant and was about to ask when. Her face whipped to the side the moment Alyssa's hard palm collided with her cheek. Her sudden action sent a wave of shock to everybody watching as they weren't expecting such an action from her. Ezekiel was about to jump in when Cindy held her hurting cheek, her red cheeks in pain. She jumped on her feet in fury, completely forgetting about her twisted ankle. She was about to attack Alyssa when she heard whispers around and people staring at her in shock. She wasn't hurt. She faked being in pain. I was supporting her, but now I know she really deserved that slap. Realizing that she had been exposed, her movement faltered and she bowed her head in shame. Alyssa turned to face Ezekiel with a scowl on her face. "If you want to accuse me of something, at least make sure I really did it," she says to him and was about to leave, but he held her back again. This time, he didn't have anger nor coldness in his eyes. Rather, it was filled with regret. Alyssa scoffed within her when she noticed the instant change in his emotions. She never saw Ezekiel as one to feel regrets. "Mommy," she heard Aiden call out to her. She turned to her side only to see him watching them. She pulled away from Ezekiel's hold immediately. "Instead of blaming others for a stupid lie, why don't spend more time in taking care of your Luna?" She sneered at him before leaving with Aiden, not bothering to spare them any more glances. At the office, Ezekiel tried so hard to drown himself in his work, but he couldn't concentrate. His head was filled with the memories of what transpired within him, Alyssa and Cindy hours ago. He was grappling with guilt when he recalled how he forced her to apologize for what she didn't do. For some reasons, even though she was angry, she didn't look surprised by his sudden request. He noticed how a small smile that appeared on her beautiful face, and how she stared at him in disappointment. She looked like she had been expecting something like that from him. It made him wonder how many times he had done something like that to her. Sure, he knew that Cindy could be cunning sometimes and lie about things that didn't happen, but he groaned when memories of how he treated her in the same way 5 years ago came to him with full force. He had done much worse, and at that time he felt really good about it. There was no ounce of regret in him then. Looking back, he realized how bad he had hurt her to the extent that she didn't expect anything different from him. What happened today was much worse. "Take care of your Luna." Her words, her harsh gaze, and the sight of her cold back as she walked away from him replayed over and over in his head. She didn't see herself as his Luna anymore, as his other half, but 5 years ago, she was vying for that position, while he never hesitated to throw how embarrassed he was of her being mute at her face. Even back in Grim Hunter's pack, when he wanted to mark her, but she pushed him away. He couldn't forget the look of disgust etched in her eyes as she violently wiped her neck. Even though he put on an indifferent look that day, he couldn't deny how hurt he was. Before, she had practically begged him to mark her, but now she was greatly repelled by just his touch. She didn't want him, his love, nor attention anymore. He felt complete guilt, much worse than when she left him, as he thought about how bad B had hurt her again and again. Was there any time he had ever managed to put a smile on her face since they got married? All he had ever done was to go the extra mile to see her in pains, to see her wide and beautiful eyes turned cold and dark. He enjoyed hurting her so much that even now that he wants to make amends for what he had done to her, his way of doing it only takes him back to square one. Just like today, even though she was cold to him, she still let him take care of her, and at some point she engaged in a conversation with him, even though it was just an argument. He enjoyed the argument he had with her. It wasn't serious, just parents arguing about their child. It felt normal and warm to him. Then he had to ruin everything, and now he wasn't sure things would be better. The thought of her not caring about him anymore unsettled him deeply. Finally, I don't have to lecture you about how bad you've screwed up. You can see by yourself that all the time our mate had spent with you was a living hell for her. His wolf mocked. I made some wrong decisions and did things I wasn't supposed to, but you're just exaggerating the situation. I wouldn't really call all of our time together hell. There were some sweet moments. Ezekiel argued. He was trying to convince himself. He knew what was the truth and what had truly happened between them. But for reasons, making it less that what it actually was made him feel less shitty about himself. Not hell? Sweet moments? His wolf asked with a scoff. You literally derived great joy in seeing her sad and in pain. There was never a moment a genuine smile appeared on her face. Every day was a living hell for her. Or have you suddenly forgotten how you made her abort our first child? His wolf reminded, sending him down the memory lane. He could still recall her loud screams as she begged him not to make her lose her baby, but he didn't listen. The guilt hit harder than it already was, as he remembered that. That was just the tip of the iceberg, but you're lucky she still stayed with you for more years. Now that you've found out about Aiden, you can agree with me that the only reason she left was to protect her child from you. Our child? Aiden is our child! I'm his father! Ezekiel yelled out angrily. A lot of men can have children, but not all of them can be fathers. Ezekiel felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured on his head the moment his wolf said that. You haven't been in his life for long, but you have already created a bad image to him, his wolf uttered. But I've made amends with him already. I supported him and bought him. Where are the toys now? They are still in your truck. Everything was going great till you had to ruin it by what you did to his mother. I'm sure he witnessed everything, and that's enough to change his idea about you. His wolf said, But, Ezekiel stammered, but he had no more excuses. His wolf was right. Alyssa had been in Aiden's life right from the moment he was born. Aiden only found out about him a few days ago. Even the smallest things that he does would be enough to change the boy's ideas about him. Today, he did the worse. He hurt his son's mother. Not physically, but that would still leave a big dent in his memory. He didn't want to be seen as a father that hurts his child's mother. That's what you're worried about? What if he finds out that you murdered his first siblings in his mother's womb? His wolf asked. Ezekiel's breath hitched as the thought of what Aiden's reaction would be when that happened swarmed in his head. He had really messed up big time. And to think that after making her abort her first child, you want to accept the one from Cindy, his wolf added. What do you expect me to do, make the same mistake I did? Ezekiel asked. No one asked you to kill another child, though I know that's your specialty. His wolf mocked. Ezekiel balled his fist angrily, but he couldn't do anything nor stop him. He and his wolf were one, and as long as he lived, his wolf won't stop reminding him of his past mistakes. Why can't you keep a distance between the both of you? If you want to make amends with Alyssa and find your way back in her heart, you have to stop making her feel like she's the second option. His wolf advised, You want me to chase Cindy away? I wasn't able to be in Aiden's life because of my past mistake, but you want me to repeat the same mistake again, Ezekiel said. The biggest mistake you made was not sending her off to find her own mate when you first got married to Alyssa, or before you brought Alyssa and her child back. At this rate, you won't be seeing Alyssa and her child anymore. Do you think she'll still remain with you now that she knows you have a child with your lover? His wolf asked. Shh. She doesn't know about the child, Ezekiel stuttered out. Yeah, believe whatever, but just so you know, keeping Cindy here with her child is nothing but the ultimate betrayal to our mate. His wolf deadpanned. No, it's just a father stepping up to take care of his child, Ezekiel argued, making his wolf laugh out loud. Wow, that's what you see it as? His wolf asked. How else would you explain it? Ezekiel asked back. Cowardice and misplaced priorities, his wolf answered. Are you calling me a coward? Ezekiel asked in anger. Who else am I talking to? You claim you're stepping up. Why didn't you get married to her when Alyssa wasn't here? Why do you want to keep both women with you now, despite knowing it would still end up badly just like 5 years ago, maybe worse? His wolf asked. Like I said. Like I'm taking responsibility for my act. That's a lie, a big lie. You just don't want the both of them to leave. You enjoy being loved and cared by others, but you don't do the same to the one that truly deserves your affection. His wolf explained. Ezekiel remained mute as he didn't know what other excuse to give. Why do you offer immense compassion to others, and yet you treat your mate with such coldness? His wolf sneered at him. Before Ezekiel could think of an answer, his wolf severed their connection, making it hard for Ezekiel to talk to him. Being alone, Ezekiel had time to think about his choices. Am I making a wrong decision in choosing to keep them both? At the mansion. After Alyssa left the hospital with her son, she took a taxi back to the mansion. It's high time I got my own car, she thought to herself. She didn't want another situation where she had to ride with Ezekiel again. She doesn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. The news about Cindy's pregnancy was enough to remind her of where she stood in his life. She walked to their room and helped Aiden take off his torn clothes. After that, she took him to the bathroom and bathed him before putting on a new set of clothes on his body. They sat facing each other on the bed as Alyssa applied ointment on the scratches he had gotten from his fight with Xavier. She winced as she treated him, even though Aiden showed no signs of being in pain. She had sent him to school in this god-forsaken pack for just 1 day, and look what happened. Even though he used to get bullied at the last pack, it hardly got physical. The children just exchanged words with him most of the time. And to think the person that assaulted him this way was supposed to be his cousin. Alyssa scoffed within her as she thought about how arrogant mother and son were. Just like Sheila and Ezekiel, they never see anything wrong in their actions. It's like a very strong family trait. It runs in their blood, but their late father wasn't like this. If Ezekiel hadn't stepped in earlier, Alyssa knew she wouldn't have let Emma and her son go scot-free. No one messes with her child. Does it hurt? Alyssa asked as she blew on his wound. It doesn't, Odney assured with a small nod. Alyssa sighed and stared at him silently. He never admits he is in pain, so she wouldn't be worried, not knowing that it only makes her more worried. He's her son, and she should be protecting him, not the other way round. She should have resisted harder when Ezekiel threatened her into come here. Their lives were more peaceful and happy back there. She put on a tight-lipped smile and kept the ointment in a drawer close to the bed. She picked up a comb and turned him to face the other side. Then she used it to brush through his short hair. After she was done, she fed him and laid him to sleep. Within few minutes, he had already drifted off into a deep slumber. Alyssa tried to fall asleep also, but she couldn't. The memories of Ezekiel forcing her to apologize to Cindy filled her head. She felt a mix of disbelief and sorrow. She thought he had changed. It was a slim chance, but she hoped he did for their son. But like always, he always goes back to who he was every single time. Now her son had been dragged into the drama. She thought she was doing this for him, to fill the hole in his heart that was caused by having no father. Now she realized that she was wrong. Having no father figure in his life was better than having an incompetent father. Now he would have to fight for his father's love and affection with Cindy's child, just like she did 5 years ago. She knew how much it pains to be the second option, and she doesn't want that for her child. She would try her best to be both a father and a mother to him like before. At least, she was sure she would never make him feel like she didn't love him, or that he was the second option. Once she settled with her plans of starting up her business again, she was going to leave the mansion with Aiden. There was nothing good happening for them there. They had been there for just one day, and a lot of drama had already happened. She decided to think about her plans of reopening her business so as to distract her from thinking about anything concerning Ezekiel and his lover. The thoughts helped distract, and within few minutes, she was already sleepy. She was about to shut her eyes once and for all when she suddenly heard a knock on the door. She stood up angrily and walked towards the door. Who would dare to disturb her sleep at this time of the night? Her anger increased when she saw Ezekiel standing outside the room, his hands held in the air like he was about to knock again. "Alyssa," he called out softly. "Can we talk?" Back at Ezekiel's office, before Ezekiel could think of an answer, his wolf severed their connection, making it hard for Ezekiel to talk to him. Being alone, Ezekiel had time to think about his choices. Am I making a wrong decision in choosing to keep them both? Ezekiel asked himself. Then he thought again. His wolf might be wrong. He might be able to solve their conflicts and keep them both together. Cindy is pregnant now, and he couldn't let what happened with Alyssa repeat itself. He is finding it hard to get his son to open up to him now. He couldn't let it happen the second time. Ezekiel snapped out of his thoughts when he realized he was already at the mansion. He had been thinking about Alyssa so much that he didn't realize when he drove to their house. He got down from the car and stared at the mansion. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't find it hard to enter the building. He didn't feel empty or alone. His family are finally here with him, which was where they belonged. He needed to clear things about him and Cindy to Alyssa, so everything can go back to its rightful place. He took a deep breath before entering the building. He ignored all the greetings from the servants around and walked straight to Alyssa's room. He knocked for a bit before the door was opened, revealing Alyssa in a gorgeous-looking nightdress that complemented her voluptuous body. His eyes roamed over her as he felt his manhood stir at its cage. The nightgown wasn't transparent, neither did it reveal her body parts, but it made her look more sexy than she already is. He was reminded of what he had gone to do when he saw the deep scowl on her face. She was really angry. "What do you want?" she voiced out harshly. "Can we talk?" "I have nothing to discuss with you," Alyssa muttered and was about to shut the door, but he placed his leg in between, making it hard for her to. "Just give me a minute. I won't take much of your time," he assured. Alyssa groaned and, "Why don't you understand that I don't want to have anything to do with you again?" she asked icily. Ezekiel stared at her silently, as he wasn't expecting such an outburst from her. "If you would just give me a minute to I don't care what goes on in your life. I never did and I never will, so stay away from me. Seeing you from time to time gives me an eyesore," she voiced out harshly. Hearing her words, Ezekiel felt heartbroken, but with the way she was coldly replying him, he couldn't show his emotions with fear that she might only break his heart the more, and that only made him angry. "Why are you being so stubborn?" he asked, as he pushed the door between them open with one push. It made Alyssa stumble back a bit, but she was quick to regain her composure. She turned towards the bed and was glad to see Aiden was still sleeping peacefully. Then she turned back to face Ezekiel, her face getting hotter as the second passed. "Shouldn't I be the one asking you that question? You barged in here, forcing me to listen to whatever useless excuse you might have made up on the way here. I know what I witnessed with you and your lover, and I'll be damned if I let you try to twist what I saw," she uttered venomously as she looked him dead in the eye. Being in such a position with Alyssa, Ezekiel felt like his authority had been challenged. He was her alpha and she had zero respect for him. Alyssa, on the other hand, didn't want to fall for his trick again. She didn't want to be tied down to him anymore, and to do that, she had to cut off whatever emotions left in her that keeps making her weak. She was no longer the same girl that had once lived for his approval, but no matter how hard she tried, their mate bond made it impossible to fully suppress the surge of emotions she feels in his presence. "Alyssa," Ezekiel called in a warning tone. "I've made my stance clear, and so should you. I don't want to engage in any other meaningless conversation unless you intend to accept my rejection," she uttered, reminding him of her hurtful words of rejection 5 years ago. Before he could reply, she slammed the door at his face and locked it. Ezekiel stared at the closed door, his mind still on her last statement. 5 years had passed already, and she's still asking him to accept her rejection. He balled his fists angrily. There's no way he would ever accept her rejection. He is her mate, whether she liked it or not, and she would remain here as his till they take their last breath. With that thought, he stormed off. Alyssa blocked off her wolf and laid back on the bed to sleep. She knew her wolf would try to stop their separation, but she had already made her decision. She couldn't keep staying with him anymore, and she hoped Ezekiel would do the needful. A week later, life went on for Alyssa and her son. Within the week, Aiden had already adapted to his new school, giving Alyssa a sense of relief. No news about him being bullied or engaged in fights reached her, and that made her happy. She took the time to turn all of her attention on finding a location for her new bakery. She came across a prime storefront in the heart of the shopping district. Excited, she arranged a meeting with the landlord. She was sitting at a cafe, waiting for the landlord to arrive when she suddenly heard a familiar voice call out to her, "Alyssa." She turned to see who it was, and to her surprise, it was Louis. She never expected to cross paths with him in Moonstone Keeper's pack. Startled, she stood up and was about to leave, but he held her back, stopping her on her tracks. "Alyssa." He called out again with a wide smile as he stood in front of her. Alyssa groaned inwardly as she looked up to face him. She had a feeling this wasn't going to end well. Louis never expected to cross paths with Alyssa this way, even though he was well aware that Ezekiel had brought her back. Seeing her again only stirred up feelings he had tried so hard to suppress. He didn't know how she could do it, but she was looking more beautiful than the last time he saw her. He was so happy to meet her again, but it didn't look like she felt the same way. Upon seeing him, she stood up immediately and turned to leave, but he was fast enough to catch up with her. He was disappointed that she didn't feel the same happiness he felt, but he couldn't blame her. Their last meeting didn't really end up in a good tone, so she might have just felt awkward in front of him. He put on a bright smile to cover up his feelings and called out to her again. "Alyssa?" he said as he turned to stand in front of her. Alyssa groaned inwardly. Who would have thought she would see him here again? Now, Lily wasn't here with her to help out. Seeing there was no way out of the situation, she looked up face him with a small smile. "Fancy seeing you here, Louis," she uttered. Louis almost laughed out upon hearing her words and the expression on her face. Fancy seeing him, but she was trying to run away from him. "You know, fake smiles don't fit you," he said with an amused expression on. Seeing that she had been caught, Alyssa chuckled in embarrassment. "Was it that obvious?" she asked as the smile slowly left her face. There was no use in putting it on. "Seeing your resting face is better than a fake smile from you, but it's fine though," Louis said, and Alyssa nodded in understanding. "Have you been hearing from Lily?" Alyssa asked after they've settled down on their seats. Since the day she last video called Lily with Aiden, she had been unable to reach her. She wasn't answering her calls and texts, and that wasn't like Lily. It only made Alyssa worried that something might have happened. "Lily traveled," Louis said as he knew what Alyssa wanted to ask. "She what?" Lily never mentioned anything about traveling to her, so why did she leave all of a sudden? "Our parents sent her abroad to resume her studies, and she's forbidden from contacting anyone except our family. That's the reason you couldn't reach her," Louis explained. Upon hearing his words, Alyssa immediately suspected foul play. Lily was doing fine as she was earning good money, so what was the need of making her continue her studies? The only person she knew that had the power to influence Lily's parents was Ezekiel, and she knew he held a big grudge against Lily. He always said she was the reason Alyssa left him. Now he had made his move and made sure Alyssa and Lily would lose contact. Alyssa felt a pang of guilt as Lily was the one suffering after all the help she had rendered to her. Now she had to cut ties with all of her friends and business partners. Alyssa sighed and palmed her face in frustration. If you want to pass a message to her, I'll gladly help you. Louis' soft voice rang. Alyssa moved the hand from her face and looked up to face him happily. Really? She asked. The glint in her eyes didn't go unnoticed. Sure. Just tell me what it is. Louis answered as he brought out his phone from his pockets to type out her messages. Thank you so much. Alyssa muttered gratefully and proceeded to tell him what she wanted him to pass across. When they were done, they switched their discussion to a more serious one, the lease agreement. Due to their history together and how he had helped her out in the past, Alyssa expected him to show favoritism to her. Instead, she was surprised by his professionalism. He acted like a true businessman, and she was more than happy about that. She didn't want to be indebted to him or anyone else. She matched his approach, and they both entered an agreement that was mutually beneficial to them. Within a few minutes, they had already concluded their discussion. Why don't we grab a meal together? Louis suggested when he noticed Alyssa packing up. Alyssa immediately felt uncomfortable at his request. She didn't enjoy the idea of being too close to him. She had only agreed to meet at the cafe because she didn't know he was going to be the landlord. I'm sorry. I can't, she declined respectfully. Louis expected that answer, so he was unfazed. I understand, he muttered with a small nod. I need to pick up Aiden. It's almost time for the kindergarten to close up, she explained as she checked her wristwatch. That was an excuse and also the truth. She didn't want him to feel bad for not agreeing to his request. Upon hearing Aiden's name, Louis' eyes lit up. Can I go with you? He asked. What? Why would you? Don't think of it as a big issue. It's been a while since I last saw Aiden, Louis explained. Alyssa didn't want him to go with her, but seeing how eager he was, she realized couldn't stop him. Even though she wanted to break off close ties with him, she couldn't do that to her son because she knows how much Aiden loves Louis. All right then, she hesitantly agreed. Happiness was an understatement of what Louis felt when she finally agreed to let him see Aiden. They both set out in his car to go pick up Aiden. At the kindergarten, Aiden's face lit up upon seeing Louis. Uncle Louis, he called out happily as he ran into Louis's open arms. Alyssa smiled happily as she watched their warm interaction. She couldn't help but notice the big difference between Louis' kindness and Ezekiel's coldness. Louis had everything, and he could easily connect to others. He was warm and kind to her son, too. Ezekiel, on the other hand, finds it hard to even connect with his own family. How did she manage to love someone like that for so long? Why don't we all go out for dinner? Aiden suggested, bringing Alyssa out of her reverie. All of a sudden, why? Alyssa couldn't help but ask. So I can catch up with Uncle Louis. Also, it's been a while since we last ate out, Aiden explained, but you have school tomorrow, Alyssa says. She still wasn't comfortable with being so close to Louis. We'll leave early then, please, Mummy, Aiden pleaded. Seeing how enthusiastic he was about it, Alyssa couldn't say no to him. All right then, but we won't stay for long, she said. Yay, Aiden yelled happily, making Alyssa chuckle. The three of them left in Louis' car, and he drove them to one of his numerous restaurants. They settled down in the large hall and their ordered meals were served. They wined and dined together, but the light-hearted atmosphere didn't last long when a party crasher came along. What's going on here? A thunderous voice resounded in the hall, making everyone shiver in fear. Alyssa turned around, only to see red, angry eyes staring right at her. Ezekiel. It's been a week since Ezekiel had that clash with Alyssa. A week since he's last been in close proximity with her. He's been avoiding her, so he doesn't have to hear her demands of accepting her rejection. He had already made the decision of not letting her go. No matter how hard she tries, or whatever she does to him, he was never going to let her and his son go. So he made the choice to avoid her, so she doesn't have to bring the topic up to his face anymore. Hearing her mention rejection only reminds him of her departure years ago, and it breaks his heart the more. It hurts him so bad that after all these years that had passed, all the years they had spent being separated, she still didn't feel the loneliness he did. She still chose to walk away again and again. Being away from her felt like hell, but that was the only thing he could do to keep her with him. Even though he couldn't be really close to her, she was still with him, and she wasn't leaving anytime soon. To reduce the extreme loneliness he felt by not being close to her, he buried himself with work. He went as far as making his office his new home. When that wasn't enough to ease the pain he felt, he would go back to the mansion and just watch from a distance to see how his mate and son were faring. Seeing them happy was enough to ease his pain. He did that for a whole week, and life was good, or so he thought. That day, while he was busy with office work, he had a visitor. His brows furrowed when he saw Cindy walk in. "My love," she called out as she walked towards him and attempted to hug him, but he held his hand up, indicating for her to stop. Her hands were held midair as she stared at him, not failing to notice the displeased look he had. Was he that unhappy to see her? "What are you doing here?" Ezekiel asked as he stared at her blankly. Hearing his question, it felt like dozens of needles had been pierced in her heart. He used to be so happy to see her whenever she comes to visit him at his workplace. This was their secret hideout since he doesn't like taking her to the mansion. She was always angry that he reserved the mansion for his mate, but now he doesn't even want her here. She took in a deep breath to suppress her emotions and calmly rested her hands back to her sides. "It's been so long since we last met, so I decided we should, maybe go out," she suggested calmly. "It's been just a week, Cindy, and—" "Why? Am I disturbing you?" she asked as a sad smile found its way to her face. "I need to finish up with what I'm doing here, so—" "It's all right. I understand," Cindy muttered as she nodded her head slowly. "I'll just go out alone with my baby then," she muttered softly as she wrapped her hands around her flat tummy. She was about to leave his office when, "Wait!" Ezekiel called out, and she turned to face him immediately. "I'll go with you, but just this once," he said, and she nodded happily. As always, he always fell for her tricks. He's so gullible. Just this one outing would be enough to seal her fate. She planned to take him to a restaurant first, so he would loosen up. After that, she would spike his food and then take him to an hotel to finish it off. After today, she must take in and bear him a son. "Let's go. I know a very good restaurant we can eat at," she suggested as she wrapped her hands around his arm. Ezekiel sighed and pulled himself out of her hold. "Let's go," he muttered as he walked away without waiting for her to catch up. Cindy frowned as she watched him leave. "Calm down. Cold down. Soon he'll be treating me with respect," she thought as she rubbed her flat belly. At the restaurant, Ezekiel never expected he would find his mate and son there. Worst of all, they weren't alone. His eyes darkened when he saw Louis in their midst. What was he doing there? He hadn't even taken his family for an outing yet, but an outsider has already done it. With the way they ate together, they looked like a perfect little family. Their loud laughter hit Ezekiel like a punch to the gut. They hardly smiled in front of him, but now they looked so happy in the arms of another man. Cindy had noticed the sudden change in Ezekiel's mood, so she followed his gaze, only to find the trio dinning happily. An evil look appeared on her face as a thought crossed her mind. "Are they dating?" she asked. "Dating? They can't be." That was Ezekiel's thought till he saw the look in Louis' eyes as he stared at Alyssa. Cindy's smirk widened when she saw Ezekiel tense up. He gritted his teeth and balled his fists. Consumed by jealousy and anger, he decided to confront Alyssa. "What's going on here?" he thundered as he walked towards them. His sudden confrontal shocked Alyssa, but she calmed down immediately. "Can't you see that we are eating?" she asked back as she took a bite from her food. Ezekiel scoffed and glared at her. "Don't try to cheeky with me," he warned. Alyssa ignored him and turned to Aiden. "Eat your food," she urged, and he obeyed. Louis, on the other hand, was too scared to continue. He never expected to see Ezekiel here, and he knew Ezekiel wasn't going to let him go scot-free after finding him with his mate and son. Ezekiel's anger only increased as Alyssa acted like he wasn't even there. All of a sudden, he grabbed her hand and pulled her up. Louis stood up and wanted to help, but one cold look from Ezekiel was enough to stop him. "You have a mate, and you are still engaging in close contact with another man. Have you no shame?" he asked angrily. "Really, and you are also in close contact with another female when you have a mate?" Alyssa thought to herself with a scoff as she turned to face Cindy, who was smirking from here she stood. "What a hypocrite," Alyssa muttered. "What?" Whatever I do with my life is none of your business. We have no business with each other anymore since we are already divorced, Alyssa said calmly. We are still mates. That's enough to connect the both of us. So why don't you behave yourself and stop acting like a... Like a what? Alyssa asked as she stared at him coldly. Ezekiel's next word was stuck in his mouth as he didn't want to say anything that would hurt her. You know what? We're going back home, he muttered as he let go of her hand. You can go back alone. Aiden and I are staying till we finish our food, Alyssa answered as she sat back on her seat. Don't be stubborn, Alyssa. Listen to me while I'm still asking nicely, Ezekiel said in a warning tone. Alyssa was about to reply him when she suddenly heard loud screams. She raised her head only to see a wolf in its full form lunge towards them. Her eyes widened when she noticed that its direction was towards Aiden. She had never seen any wolf as big and scary looking as this. Without hesitation, she shielded Aiden with her body and shut her eyes, waiting to the pain of being pierced by such large claws to course through her. Instead of agony, she felt the protective warmth of a familiar embrace. She opened her eyes only to see Ezekiel's red ones staring back at her. He had saved her and her son. But why? Seeing the rogue wolf lunge towards his family at full force, Ezekiel set to action immediately. He didn't waste any time, as all that was in his mind was protecting them at all cost. Forgetting he could shift into his full wolf form too, he ran towards his family and shielded them with his body from harm. The rogue's sharp and long claws dug into his brand shoulders, sending searing pain to his back. Since he had used his human form to block the attacks, the pain hit him worse than it should have, but he didn't flinch, as protecting his family was his top priority. At that moment, something hurt him more than the pain should have. When he shielded Alyssa and Aiden with his body, his eyes met with Alyssa's, and he didn't miss how shocked she was, and the look of disbelief that was all over her face as she watched him shield her and their son from harm. Her disbelief increased when she saw the blood seeping through his back. The emotions he saw on her face hurt more than the wound he got from the rogue. His mate didn't believe he would ever protect her. It was like a dagger to his heart. He was willing to sacrifice his life for them, but she couldn't even believe it. At that moment, he realized all of his past mistakes. He had never protected her in front of her enemies and bullies since they got married. Instead of being her protector and someone she could lean on when things got tough, he became one of her tormentors, if not the biggest one, and made life miserable for her. He had hurt her too much that she doesn't see herself as someone important in his life. She doesn't even realize that she was the only one in his heart and someone he was willing to give his life for. Ezekiel shut his eyes to stabilize his emotions, not caring about the pains being caused by the rogue's claws and teeth continuously sinking into his back. He needed to find a way to fight back. At that moment, all of the customers in the restaurant had fled as they didn't want any entanglement with a rogue wolf. It was the most vicious and violent wolf they had ever seen. Even Louis was nowhere too, he found, so Ezekiel had to fight the rogue alone. He let the wolf attack him first before he suddenly turned to the wolf and returned the attack. He grabbed the wolf by the neck and used all of his strength to throw him away. That action sent the wolf flying to the other end of the room. Then he turned towards Alyssa, only to see her shivering in fear. "You need to. Look out!" His words were cut short when Alyssa screamed out with her eyes wide opened in fear and panic. It seemed like she was staring at something behind him. He turned only to see the wolf coming back at him with more force. He was surprised because the force in which he had used to throw the wolf away initially should have weakened it. Instead, it looked stronger than it was when it first attacked. This was something that baffled Ezekiel, but he didn't falter. He stood his ground and returned the attack on the rogue. His strength and that of the rogue weren't on par. He was weaker, as he wasn't in his wolf form, but he didn't let that stop him. He battled with the rogue fearlessly, as he was well trained in combat since he was a kid. Alyssa, on the other hand, didn't leave her spot. She made sure Aiden shut his eyes and covered his ears with her hands, as she didn't want him to witness what was going on. She knew the brutality was going to leave marks in his memory as he was still a kid. As Ezekiel battled fearlessly and relentlessly with the wolf, he noticed that the wolf was always aiming towards Aiden. It would try to lunge towards Aiden, but Ezekiel always stopped him. It wasn't easy to hold him back because of how strong the wolf was, but he tried his best because he couldn't let any harm come to his family. As the fight went on, he was getting weaker and weaker while the wolf only got stronger and increased its attacks on Ezekiel. Ezekiel's body was battered by the wolf's teeth and claw marks all over, but he didn't relent. Just then, footsteps were heard. Alyssa looked over only to see Louis and many of the pack's abled warriors. He had left to round them up, as he knew that the wolf they were fighting against wasn't an ordinary rogue. Within few seconds, the rogue wolf was subdued by the other wolves. Louis walked towards Ezekiel and crouched close to where he laid. "Are okay?" he asked with a small wince when he noticed the cuts all over Ezekiel's body. Ezekiel ignored his question. He stood up shakily, rejecting Louis' outstretched hand, and walked towards where the rogue wolf was. Before he could ask any question, the wolf collapsed and started foaming at the mouth. It seemed like a poison was in the wolf's system. It didn't take long before the wolf drew its last breath. Ezekiel watched silently, his head swarmed with several questions. Who would dare to attack an alpha's child? Much worse, his own child? He knew this wasn't a simple matter, as the rogue had a target. Rogues hardly ever do that. They only attacked whomever crossed their way, but this one wanted to harm a child who has never done anything to him. Or was the rogue sent by his enemies? Ezekiel didn't know about any enemy of his that would have the balls to attack his family. He needed to get to the bottom of the issue. As the wolf warriors dragged the wolf's dead body away, he turned to face Alyssa. He noticed the tears stained on her face and her eyes filled with fear as she watched the dead wolf being dragged away. Alyssa never expected to come in contact with a rogue again after her family had been wiped away by one before. Watching how violent the rogue wolf was when Ezekiel fought with it, Alyssa was filled with fear as she thought she was going to lose another person that she loved. Ezekiel knew what rogues had done to her before, so he expected such a reaction from her. At that moment, he didn't care about the pain that he was feeling. All that was in his head was to engulf her in a tight hug and comfort her, because she didn't look stable. He was about to head to where she was when a loud scream filled the air. Cindy, who had been watching from afar, couldn't help but notice the look on Ezekiel's face. All her plans for today had been ruined, and from the looks of it, she was even helping to bring Alyssa and Ezekiel closer than before. She never expected him to protect them. She thought he would still stand aside like he used to. She couldn't bear to watch them together, so she decided to take action. She walked towards them and let out a shrill scream, drawing everyone's attention to her. "You're bleeding too much. You need to be taken to the hospital," she said at the top of her voice. Ezekiel stared at his wound for a brief moment. "It's fine. It's just a small scratch," he assured, his eyes returning back to Alyssa. His assurance was meant for Alyssa, as he didn't want her to feel bad for how battered he looked. "No, you're not all right. There are several deep cuts all over your body," Cindy muttered as she moved to touch his wounds, but he held her hands. She took that as her chance and held him too and started shedding tears. "I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. If only I hadn't." Before she could complete her words, he pulled her into a small hug. He was annoyed by her incessant crying and complaints. That was the only thing he could think of to make her shut up, and it worked. It was only for a brief moment before he pulled away. He turned back to face Alyssa, only to see coldness and disappointment flickering in her eyes. From her expression, he knew he had made yet another mistake. The wave had been calmed, but Alyssa still felt an inner turmoil. The rogue that attacked them was definitely no ordinary one. One could easily tell he was either sent to kill her son or just had a grudge with the child. Why would a rogue who hadn't even crossed paths with her son before have a grudge with him to the extent that it would try to end him? It was definitely not the latter. She was sure someone had hired the rogue. She didn't know about anyone she had offended in Grimhunter's pack, but here in Moonstone Keeper's pack, she knows she has a lot of enemies. There are a whole bunch of people that hated her, but she never expected they would go after her son. Worst of all, She can't pinpoint who sent the rogue now that it is dead. Seeing the dead rogue reminded her of her past, how her family and pack were said to be wiped out by them. Though she doesn't remember how it happened, it still gave her chills. If the rogue hadn't been subdued, would she have lost another person that was dear to her heart? If that had happened, she didn't know how she would be able to deal with it. Her eyes moved to Ezekiel, and she winced slightly when she saw the claw and bite marks all over his body. His injuries were deep, but he's still standing. He had risked his life and body to save her. He saved her, and Aiden. She had never expected a day like this would come. It'd been a long time since he had last came to her aid. It was when they didn't know that they were mates. What changed now? Even though it wasn't what she had expected of him, she figured she still had to thank him. Without his help, her and her son would have been scattered to bits. She didn't think she would be able to handle such an attack. With that thought, she moved towards him when Cindy suddenly screamed out. Alyssa rolled her eyes because she knew Cindy was one who loved to throw tantrums, and she also loved drawing attention to herself. This should also be one of her acts. That was what Alyssa had initially thought until she heard Cindy's words. "I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. If only I hadn't." And worst of all, Ezekiel hugged her to calm her down. Cindy's words and the scene being played in front of her hit Alyssa like a bucket of ice water. The person he had meant to save was Cindy. Cindy was the one he wanted to protect, not her or her son. Even though she wanted to have doubts about what Cindy had said, seeing the way he had pulled her into his embrace to comfort her without wasting time was enough for her. She should have known. She had always been a bystander in their midst. Why did she get excited for no reason? Why did she feel sorry for him? The injuries he had was gotten from protecting his lover. Her and her child were just in the way. Just like that, whatever concern she had for Ezekiel dissolved into nothing. She felt stupid for even caring in the first place. "You can't jump into conclusion yet. It might be a misunderstanding," her wolf suggested. But Alyssa was way past the stage of trying to see any good in Ezekiel. All that she felt at the moment was just bitterness. "There's no misunderstanding because this is the Ezekiel I've always known," Alyssa said to her wolf, and them shut her off. She couldn't care less about someone that doesn't give a fuck about her nor her child. It was just her and Aiden. She turned towards her son and crouched in front of him. "Are you okay?" she asked as she touched Hairhead in concern while he nodded his head with a small smile. Ezekiel felt agitation when he saw the cold and disappointed look in Alyssa's eyes, making him realize he had made yet another mistake. He quickly pushed Cindy aside and walked towards Alyssa. "It isn't what you two." "It doesn't matter," she answered, interrupting his words. But she didn't bother to listen to whatever excuses he had. She picked up Aiden in her arms as she wanted to leave. She couldn't bear to waste another second there. She was about leaving when Ezekiel grabbed her arm. "You're leaving?" he asked, hurt evident in his voice. Alyssa turned and stared at him in surprise, wondering why he would be pained when he had his lover with him. "Won't you accompany me to the hospital to get treated?" he asked, making Alyssa scoff. He had just told Cindy that his wounds were fine, so why does he want her to accompany him? Does he want to throw his relationship with his lover at her face like he used to? "Why would you want me to accompany you when you have Cindy?" she asked harshly. She didn't want to relive the pain of having to be the third wheel in the past. Even though she tries so hard to forget, just one look at the lovebirds was enough to send her down the memory lane of her hurtful past. Seeing them together, she was reminded of when she was still married to Ezekiel. It was shortly after their wedding when she accidentally cut her finger while she was preparing a meal for her darling husband. At that time, Ezekiel was still bringing his lover home, and she couldn't complain for the fear of him pouring out his anger and frustration of not being able to get married to Cindy on her. Due to the pain of having to think about what they were doing in the room, she was distracted and she cut herself by mistake. The wound was very deep with thick layers of blood dripping down her feet. She went to Ezekiel, hoping he would take her to the hospital, but he mocked her. He told her she cut herself on purpose just because she was seeking his attention. As if the hurtful words weren't enough, He turned his attention to his lover and doted on her over a minor bump. Alyssa had more than enough reasons to not care about Ezekiel, so she no longer harbored any illusions about Ezekiel. What had happened today had confirmed it all. He had never for once loved her the way she loved him. Not then, not now. She ignored the pain in his eyes when she told him to take his lover instead. She wiggled her arm out of his hold and was about leaving when her wolf's voice came in. Irrespective of who he had intended to save, you can't deny the fact that he still protected you and Aiden. He is flawed, but without him, you and your son wouldn't be able to leave in one piece. So just give him a break, her wolf said to her. Alyssa softened slightly and turned to Ezekiel only to see the pleading look in his eyes. She didn't want to get too close, but what can she do? Her wolf was right. If he hadn't saved her, she wouldn't have been able to hold such attacks the way he did, and her son would definitely suffer casualties too. The least she could do was accept his request. All right, I'll go with you. Her curt statement was enough to replace Ezekiel's pleading and sad look with a wide smile. Even though she looked indifferent to his feelings, it was still a win to him. She still cared enough to accompany him to the hospital. Ezekiel made Alyssa and Aiden ride with him to the hospital. Since he was badly injured, one of the wolf warriors that helped subdue the rogue drove the car. He didn't want any other complications with Alyssa, so he didn't let Cindy use the same car they used, despite her trying to convince him that she should be the one to go with him. The ride to the hospital was suffocatingly silent and unbearable for Ezekiel. Even though Alyssa had chosen to accompany him to the hospital, she still didn't really care much about his situation. At first, he thought it was fine as long as she came with him. He thought he only needed her presence, but now he knows he wanted me than that. She was close to him, but she didn't even spare him one glance. She poured all of her attention on Aiden, tenderly soothing him while he was made to watch from across the vehicle. She was supposed to be treating him that way because he was the injured one. He hoped she would at least spare him a short glance. Even though it was for a split moment, it would be much better than having to feel like the third wheel in the midst of his own family. He thought about what had happened at the restaurant earlier. Maybe she's still mad that I hugged Cindy earlier? He asked himself. He opened his mouth severally, desperate to explain his side of view. Har wanted to let her know where he stands. He wanted to tell her that he doesn't feel anything for Cindy anymore, but each time he tried to explain, he was at loss for words because of Alyssa's frosty demeanor. Even though she didn't say anything to him, he still felt like she wasn't going to listen to him, same thing she did back at the restaurant. Ezekiel sighed as he didn't know what to do. He badly wanted to end every bad blood between them. This wasn't what he envisioned when he thought of how to bring her back into his life during the time of their separation. He thought things would go back to the way it once was, with Alyssa still deeply in love with him. If it was that easy, she wouldn't have left in the first place. Ezekiel's wolf chipped in. Yeah, I see that now, Ezekiel answered in frustration. All those years of your maltreatment to her for no reason is coming back to haunt you, just like I told you it would. His wolf mocked. Can we not do this right now? At that moment, Ezekiel didn't need anyone to lecture him about his past mistakes, especially not his wolf. I once warned you about how you used to treat her, but you didn't listen. I bet you never thought it would backfire this way on you. As long as we are still together, I'll always make sure to do this every single time. His wolf added before severing their connection. Ezekiel sighed deeply and turned his eyes back to Alyssa. He had to make sure things were all right between them soon before she mentions him accepting her rejection again. At the hospital, Ezekiel was attended to immediately. The doctors and nurses realized that it was him. He was given emergency treatment by a professional doctor. Alyssa watched from the far end of the room as the doctor catered for Ezekiel's wounds. She noticed the slight groans escaping his mouth and how his muscles tensed up whenever the doctor touched any of the cuts. She didn't realize how deeply in pain he was since he didn't show it earlier. She had the urge to walk up to him and comfort him. She held herself back when she was reminded of the fact that he didn't take the blows for her. All of a sudden, the door to the ward was pushed open from the outside, and Cindy rushed in, breathing heavily. She had taken a taxi down to the hospital, but she had to climb a flight of stairs to get to his ward, as the elevator was occupied by others. She didn't want Ezekiel to spend another moment with Alyssa and her son to avoid them getting closer, so she chose to use the stairs. By the time she got to the entrance of the ward he was admitted in, she found it hard to breathe. Seeing her, Ezekiel let out a frustrated sigh. He had made sure she didn't ride with them to prevent her from coming and ruining his time with Alyssa, but she was too stubborn. "How's he, doctor?" Cindy asked as she hovered by his side, acting like she was his caretaker at the moment, even though she was well aware of the fact that he didn't want her there with him. "The wounds are deep, but not life-threatening." The doctor answered as he sewed up the wounds. "It's all Alyssa's fault. There have never been a rogue attack in Moonstone Keeper's pack before. She led them here same way she led them to wipe out her family and pack. She has a knack of drawing disasters to others because she's cursed." Cindy whispered venomously as she sent Alyssa a harsh glare. Upon hearing Cindy's words, Ezekiel clenched his fists in anger. He knew that Alyssa's family and pack was a sensitive topic to her. This was the reason he didn't want to bring Cindy with him. She always makes everything worse with her words. He wanted to defend Alyssa, but when he noticed her distant look, he felt helpless. She wasn't going to care if he took a stand for her because he had done worse than this to her. "Get out!" he said to Cindy. That was the only thing he could do at that moment. "What?" Cindy was surprised as she didn't expect him to order her out right in front of Alyssa. She thought he was going to send Alyssa out instead. "I just want my Luna to care for me," he added, his eyes on Alyssa even though she didn't spare him a look. Cindy's jaw dropped upon hearing his words. Today, Ezekiel has been doing things he never did 5 years ago, like when he jumped in without thinking to protect Alyssa. Before, he would have let the rogue inflict injuries on her first before stopping it. When he chose to ride to the hospital with just Alyssa and their child, when there was enough space for her to join in, and now he's chasing her away just for telling the truth. Ezekiel had changed from who he used to be, and it's getting on her nerves. Being his lover was manageable, but now he was treating her like she was a nuisance to him. If she didn't lie about being pregnant, she knows things would have been worse for her. She wanted to argue, but she held herself back. She can't ruin her plans all because of little setbacks. She glared at Alyssa again before storming out in anger. After the doctor had finished dressing Ezekiel's wound, he prescribed some pain-relieving drugs to him, as it seemed like the wounds would take time to heal before he finally left the ward. Aiden stood up from where he sat and walked over to Ezekiel. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly as he stared at Ezekiel's bandaged wounds. Hearing his question, Ezekiel's heart melted. At least someone genuinely cared about him. Despite being in pain, he forced out a smile and assured him, "My wounds will heal soon. Then we can go out together and engage in any activities of your choice." Aiden's face lit up in joy, but it was just for a small moment. His eyes faltered when he realized he had said too much. His mom might not like him engaging too much with Ezekiel. His eyes darted nervously to Alyssa as he waited for her to scold him. Instead of scolding him, Alyssa pulled into her arms and engaged him in a warm embrace. Ezekiel watched them silently, feeling a deep sense of regret. Watching them, he realized how much of his son's life he had missed and how badly he had treated Alyssa. If he hadn't maltreated her all those years, he wouldn't have to walk on eggshells around them now. What he had done to Alyssa was truly unforgivable, but he still wanted to do whatever he could to earn her forgiveness. It will be hard, but he didn't care. All that matters is his family being comfortable with him. Alyssa didn't stay long when she suddenly announced that she was leaving with Aiden so Ezekiel could rest. "Why don't you stay longer? I'm not tired of your presence," Ezekiel pleaded, not wanting to be far away from them. "We're leaving." Alyssa refused coldly, ignoring his pleas. Seeing her about to leave, Ezekiel stood up to stop her, but the pain from his wounds didn't let him take a step. He landed back on the bed immediately. Alyssa left the ward without looking back, her resolute departure leaving him with an ache far worse than his injury. It made him wonder if that was also how she felt whenever he chose to ignore her in her time of need. Alyssa boarded a taxi and it drove them back to the mansion as per her request. She paid the driver before entering into the huge building with Aiden by her side. It was already late, and Aiden had eaten to his fill back at the restaurant, so she took him straight into their room. Even though Ezekiel had already prepared a separate room for Aiden, she still didn't let him out of her sight. She never trusted anyone in the mansion. Back when she was the only one there, she knew how much she had suffered in the hands of everyone living there. She doesn't even let the servants touch her son or even prepare any food to feed him because she knew no one there liked her. They all worked for her enemies, so she was always on guard whenever she was around them. Some people might call her a paranoid person, but after what had happened at the restaurant today, her actions became justified. She realized that as long as she stayed there, she couldn't trust just anyone here in Moonstone Keeper's pack. Even though she was their rightful Luna, no one gave her the respect she deserved. They don't even realize her position because of how their alpha treats her. Even now, their hatred still hadn't died down, but they haven't started making trouble with her yet. They now know that the mute Alyssa they once bullied before wasn't the same one that's with them right now. She was much stronger than she used to be, and she wouldn't stand back and let them treat her like they used to, especially now that her Psalm was here with her. In their room, Alyssa took Aiden's clothes off and cleaned him up before putting on a fresh set of pajamas on him. After that, she took her bath and put on her nightwear too. Underneath the room's dim light, she laid down on the bed next to Aiden and stared at the ceiling. Even though it's been hours since it happened, she still couldn't shake off the images of the rogue that attacked them today. Images of his vicious-looking face still pops up in her head, and it sends chills down her spine. Today was supposed to be a happy day, as she was finally able to secure a building for her bakery, but her son had to get attacked. Like she knew this was going to happen, she rejected eating out at first until Aiden persuaded her. All that she was grateful for was that Aiden didn't see the rogue, as she made sure of that. Even her, an adult, is scared by just seeing how the rogue looked. Imagine how deeply it would have been imprinted in a child's memory. She wouldn't want that for her son. Alyssa sighed and turned to her side to face Aiden, only to see that he was still awake. "Aren't you sleepy yet?" Alyssa asked as she brushed her fingers in his hair lovingly. "Not yet, Mommy," he answered with a small head shake. Today had been hectic, so she thought he would fall asleep without her help. Well, she was wrong. Instead of reading him a bedtime story to help him fall asleep like she used to, she decided to engage him in a conversation. "Aiden," she called out, and Aiden turned to match her gaze. "Your father, how do you feel about him?" she questioned inquisitively. Even though Ezekiel had never failed to bring her misery every time they crossed paths, she still doesn't fail to notice how he tries earnestly to be closer to Aiden. "I just want you to be safe, Mommy," Aiden answered innocently. "Thank you, baby," Alyssa said as she ruffled his hair. "But that wasn't the question I asked." She added, "If you're fine with him, then I am. What matters is that he treats you well too," Aiden explained. Hearing the words that were coming out of his mouth, Alyssa couldn't help but feel touched. In a place where she had always felt like she was alone, she now has someone to lean on. Giving birth to Aiden was more than a blessing to her. He was her most precious gift that she had ever gotten from the moon goddess. He was the only thing that's keeping her sane till this moment, and he was her reason to keep on living when the odds were against her. With him, she no longer feel alone in this world. "Come here," she whispered as she pulled him into a warm embrace. "I love you so much, baby," she muttered as a lone tear rolled down her cheek. It was a tear filled with joy and contentment. "I love you too, Mom," Aiden said as he hugged her back. Both mother and son stayed in each other's arms till they pulled away. Despite Aiden's age, he was more matured than he should be, so Alyssa never fails to discuss her next step in life with him. After all, it was going to affect him too. "Guess what?" she started. "What is it, Mom?" Aiden asked as her started at her earnestly. "I plan to open a new bakery here," she announced. Aiden's eyes lit up upon hearing that. "Really?" he asked happily. "Yes, I've gotten the building already. All that's left is hiring workers and getting my baking equipments," she added. "That's good news. Finally, I get to taste your delicious pastries again," Aiden said as he swiped his lips with his tongue, making Alyssa chuckle softly. "If you wanted to taste it, I would have made it for you here," she said. "Pastries taste better when they are made at the bakery. Also, I didn't want to disturb you," he said softly. "Well, now, you get to eat them as much as you want," Alyssa muttered with a soft smile. "Thank you, Mommy," said Aiden. "You welcome, baby. Also, I plan to leave this pack with you when I've saved enough," she added. "We'll be going back to our home?" Aiden asked as the glint in his eyes grew. "Yes, baby, we'll be going back home," Alyssa answered with a small nod. "Yes, I can't wait," Aiden muttered happily. "Me neither. Don't worry, Mommy. As long as we're always together, everything will fall into place," Aiden said to her in an encouraging and supportive tone. "I know, baby. I know," Alyssa answered with a wide smile on her face. That night, Aiden fell asleep with a wide smile on his face. Alyssa watched him quietly as he slept peacefully. She remembered his words of encouragement, and she couldn't be happier. There's no one holding them back from leaving now. "What about Ezekiel?" Her wolf's voice surfaced. "And what about him?" Alyssa asked back. "Do you think he'll let you leave just like that?" Her wolf asked again. "He can't force me to be here with him. I'll always find a way to leave, just like I did 5 years ago." Alyssa replied, "What if he decides to stop chasing after you? Are you ready to give up on him?" "If I wasn't, I wouldn't have left him in the first place. I've never been a part of his heart, and the earlier I realize that, the better for me." Alyssa replied firmly. She wasn't alone anymore. She had her son with her, and she was determined to build a better life for them both. She doesn't see a bright future for her and her son if she keeps staying with Ezekiel, so the best thing to do is to leave. With that thought in mind, she went to bed. The next day, Alyssa watched Simon drive Aiden to school before she left to continue with the setup of her bakery. With the help of Louis, she was able to secure all of the supplies needed to reopen. They were currently at the bakery, arranging all they have bought. "So, what do you plan to name this bakery?" Louis asked as he placed the last box of supplies in the storage room. "The same name I had for my former bakery," Alyssa answered curtly as she wiped the dusty shelves. "Why's that?" "It's for Lily. I was hoping she would be able to find me easily upon her return," Alyssa's answered as a wide smile appeared on her face. Louis stared at her silently for a while. "I never knew you guys were this deeply in love," he said with a sad smile. Alyssa stared at him in confusion before realizing why he had made such a comment. He still believed the lie they told. His statement made Alyssa feel awkward, but she didn't correct him. He needed to believe they were actually lovers so he would easily let go of whatever feelings he had for her. She continued with what she was doing when she suddenly received a text message from an unknown number. She clicked on the text message and a picture popped up on her screen. It was a photo of Cindy and Ezekiel kissing passionately while at the hospital. She scoffed when she saw the picture. He pleaded so much with her to stay yesterday, and now he's in the arms of his lover. She was about to turn off her phone when she noticed something in the photo, making her suspect that the kiss was staged. Ezekiel woke up feeling better than he did the day before. His wounds had already started healing, but it was just a gradual process. He still felt pains on the deeper cuts. As he tried to sit up on the hospital bed, he felt the weight of someone holding him down. His insides bubbled happily as he thought Alyssa came back to stay with him. He had sent Cindy away yesterday, so the only person who would be here with him should be Alyssa. Well, that was his hope, but it quickly faded away when he turned to his side and saw Cindy sleeping next to him like a baby. The initial joy he had slowly faded away and was replaced with disappointment. That still didn't stop him from searching for Alyssa, as he thought she would still come back to him. There's no way she would ever leave him alone at the hospital. She wasn't that heartless. "Alyssa?" He called out as his eyes wandered around his ward frantically. His loud voice disrupted Cindy's sleep and she woke up immediately. "You're awake," she muttered happily when him, but he didn't mind her. She wasn't who he wanted at that moment. "Are you searching for something?" she asked when she noticed how his eyes darted around the room. Did Alyssa come here? He asked back, finally moving his eyes to her. Cindy stared at him in shock, her heart hurting badly. She had stayed with him since yesterday. She took care of him all through the night and helped massage his body when he kept moaning his pain. Now that he had finally woken up, the first person he asked about was that wench. She didn't even look twice when she left him alone at the hospital yesterday. She, on the other hand, has always been here for him. Why doesn't he acknowledge her too? She had a lot to say, a lot to scream at his face, but she held herself back. Even though she didn't utter a word, his face did all the talking. She looked so hurt and pained. When Ezekiel saw the hurt on her face, he felt a twinge of guilt. "Thank you for taking care of me," he muttered as he didn't want to apologize to her. Apologizing wasn't his thing. Cindy nodded her head and stood up from the bed so he would rest well. Hearing him thank her, it made her insides bubble in joy, but she chose not to show it. She was the reason his dearest mate wouldn't come to see him. She made sure Alyssa would be in so much pain to even want to see him. Earlier, she had devised a devious plan. She knew Ezekiel would start searching for Alyssa the moment he woke up. She decided to do something to stop her from coming, even though he tries to force her to. While Ezekiel was sleeping, she kissed him passionately and took a photo of their kiss. Ezekiel would have never let her do it if he was awake, so she was really quick. After that, she took Ezekiel's phone and opened it, as he didn't have any password on it. She searched for Alyssa number and found it immediately. She scoffed in anger and jealousy when she saw that he added her number to his favorites. Alyssa's number was the only one there. He had never done that for her or anyone close to him. What type of spell did Alyssa cast on him that's making him behave this way? Cindy held back the urge to delete Alyssa's number from his phone as she kept reminding herself that she had a much better plan that would make Alyssa leave like before. She had to steady her emotions, as Ezekiel couldn't find out she sent Alyssa such a photo. She copied Alyssa's number to her phone and sent the photo to her, before placing Ezekiel's phone right where it was. After that, she put her phone in her purse before proceeding to lay next to Ezekiel. "You don't need to thank me. You know I'll always do anything for you, even though you choose not to acknowledge me," Cindy said to Ezekiel with a small smile. Ezekiel stared at her silently, not knowing what to say. Just then, he remembered that she was pregnant. "You shouldn't stress yourself too much because of your condition. You know what? Why don't you go home and rest?" he suggested as he stared at her in concern. Since she was still putting on the same clothes as yesterday, that only means that she didn't go home like he had ordered. A pregnant woman shouldn't be stressing herself this way. "I'm fine. I already slept," she answered happily. She was glad that he still cared for her, even though it's all because of a lie. "It won't be a lie anymore once I get pregnant for him," she thought to herself as she rubbed on her flat belly slowly. "Why don't you undergo a checkup just in case? You've been stressing yourself so much these days. I don't want anything to happen to the baby," Ezekiel muttered as he stared intensively at her flat belly. "There's no need for a checkup. The baby's fine." Cindy resisted. She couldn't go through any checkup as that would only put her plans at risk. "You don't know that. When my wounds are fully healed, I'll take you for the checkup. We can't risk anything happening to our baby," he said, brushing off her protests. Ezekiel didn't want to miss any moment of his child's life like he did with Aiden, as that would only leave him with more regrets. Cindy had no choice but to go with him for the checkup. She still had time to get pregnant for him before the day. She had to do all she can to make him lay with her, even if it's just once. "For giving me a chance to be in my baby's life, I would like to reward you. Ask me for anything and I'll do my best to fulfill it," Ezekiel said as he was in a sudden good mood. Hearing his words, Cindy thought of the one thing she had always wanted right from the beginning. "I want you to send both Alyssa and her son away and crown me as your Luna," she voiced out hopefully. Ezekiel gave her a stern look, wondering why she would request something like that after everything he's told her. "You know that's not possible. Alyssa is my Luna and she would remain that till we both draw our last breaths, so don't make such wishes anymore because it will never happen," he said firmly. Cindy had already known this was going to be his answer, so it didn't hurt her, as she already had a plan. She nodded in feigned defeat and bowed her head sadly. "If you say so," she whispered as a fake tear escaped her eye. "Ask for something else, something I'll be able to give you." Ezekiel told her, as he was feeling guilty. "I need your company," she said. "My company? Yes, I want you to be with me for a while, for our baby's sake," she added as she stared at him hopefully. Ezekiel went silent as he thought long and hard about her demand. "There's no need to think much about it. You can't stay with her." Ezekiel's wolf voiced out. "Then what would you expect me to do?" Ezekiel asked back. "Let her be. You can be checking on her from time to time, but giving her all of your attention, that's just too extreme. You haven't even done that for our mate," his wolf added. "It would just be for a month, then I'll go back to Alyssa," Ezekiel explained. "No matter how long or short the time would be, it's still a betrayal to our mate. Do this, and you'll definitely lose her forever," his wolf warned before severing their connection. Ezekiel thought about what his wolf had said, but he didn't think Alyssa would leave him. It was just for a month, and his baby needed him. He decided to ignore his wolf's warning. "I'll stay with you, but it will be for a short period of time," Ezekiel answered, agreeing to her request. A wide smile appeared on Cindy's face when she realized her plan had worked. He had fallen for her trick yet again, and now that he agreed to stay with her, it would be easier for her to get pregnant for him. Later that day, Ezekiel sent a text to Alyssa, informing her he wouldn't return home for a month. After he sent the text, Ezekiel waited anxiously for her reply, hoping she would ask him to stay. His hopes were vanquished when he saw her response, and it was just a curt, "Okay." He called her, only to find out that she had blocked his number. Realization dawned on him that she didn't care about what he did with his life anymore. Furious and hurt, he discharged himself from the hospital despite the doctor's medical advice to stay for a more few days. He wanted to confront Alyssa to know why she was behaving this way to him.